Looking back on the week that was and forward to the week ahead. It's the Fantasy Football Hustle. Here are your hosts, Brian Drake and Dwain McFarland.
What's going on out there all across fantasy land? It is the Fantasy Football Hustle. I am Brian Drake of FightingChanceFantasy.com, joined as always by Pro Football Focus and Establish the Run's Dwain McFarland. And this is it, folks. This is the show, the Draft Plan Show, which you've waited all off season for. Maybe you're a little late to the game to come back in, but welcome. If you need to get ready for drafts over the next 2 weeks, this is the place. Because, folks, fantasy football is about trust. Do you trust your players? Do you trust their play callers? Do you trust your research? Let's be honest, folks. We're here to win. Second place money doesn't matter. We want trophies and checks. That's it. Learn to trust your gut. Learn to trust where you get your information, more importantly. Learn to be a better fantasy football player. And that's where we come in. Now ask yourself, everybody out there listening, do I trust where I get my fantasy advice? Well, do you? Well, what's that guy ever won? What big checks has he ever cashed? There are lots of experts, analysts, and counselors out there. Most of them have never won a nickel. Our guy, the man we trust, Dwain, puts his money where his mouth is. He's a 3-time FFPC top 5 finisher. Guy's won over $100,000 playing fantasy football over the last 8 years. Let that sink in. $100,000. Just this week alone, he entered 3 high-stakes leagues with $300+ buy-ins to get ready for this show. What other guy in fantasy football is doing that? I'll fill you in. Nobody. Now ask yourself, is that someone whose advice you'd trust? I think so too. Now saddle up. Let's get ready because you got one shot to draft a winning team. This info is worth its weight in gold. Sit back, listen. Let's dominate some drafts. Trust me. Dwain, welcome to the Draft Plan Show.
Dude, I feel like it's my birthday. It's your birthday. With that intro, I feel like it should be my birthday. Like, that's the best intro you've ever given me, Drake. You give me really good intros, but I was like,
I only come in.
Okay, I feel like I'm like, am I a guest?
I only do enough for the Draft Plan Show because that's where we get the most listeners, and that's why we wear matching shirts here on the Hustle. If you're watching on our YouTube channel, and why aren't you, over at the Fantasy Football Hustle YouTube page, hit subscribe. We'll love you forever. So it is. It's my 40th birthday. It's the Draft Plan Show. Dwain is so locked and loaded. I text this guy all week long like, hey, man, what are you doing? It's midnight. He's like, I'm getting ready to draft, man. I'm in a high-stakes league. I'm like, all right, brother, do your thing. And he would send me the
don't
results.
Make all of our high-stakes pals, mad. 350 is mid-stakes, buddy. 1900, 2000, that's high stakes. So
the guys out there who are playing in those $100 garage leagues like me and all my buddies, I'm kind of that voice of the working man out there. I'm not spending crazy money on this, but I hitch my wagon to a guy who does, and I trust Dwain's research, and I trust his process. That's what we're going to go through tonight. We're going to hit you with a general overview of draft strategy, okay? Maybe you've been out of the game a little while. We're going to get you back in. Then we're going to funnel it down to this year draft strategy. We're going to go position by position, starting at the running back spot, then wide receiver, tight end, QB. At the end, we're even going to look at some teams that Dwain drafted for $350, show you how he put his money where his mouth is, put the process into play. So let's start off, Dwain. Okay, general draft strategy. Kind of let's break it all down for folks. What do they need to know just walking into their garage 2 weeks from now, cracking a Bud Light, ready to win some cash?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things, but I'll kind of boil it down. And so this part really isn't like player specific or anything, but it's just, from drafting, so many teams over so many years and just learning how to think about, drafting. I would kind of break it down into the do's and don'ts, Drake. And so this will be, I try to hit, a little bit for everybody here, whether you're a beginning drafter or whether you're, kind of in the middle, or if you really consider yourself, like you're very serious about it, and you may be a better drafter than me. Some of the people we get in these rooms, sometimes like a Chad, Schroeder drops in. Yeah. Like they're better than me. Like, and I learn a lot of stuff from them. And some of these things I share with you, to be honest, I mean, I'm always trying to learn from the best players. And it's like you said, it's nothing against the analyst. I like a lot of the analysts, and I've grown to know a lot of them doing this work. But before I was an analyst, I mean, I've always just been a player. And so a lot of these guys are the ones putting their money where their mouth is, and they draft over and over. They test their theories, they test, their tiers, they do everything. So the first thing really, is you just want to be prepared. If you're going into a draft, number one, what I always tell people, like I'll see some people and they're like, well, I got this and I got this and I got this. I'm like, stop. I was like, one sheet that has all your players on it. You got them in your tiers, and your marker or your computer with your tiers on it. That's all you need up. It has everything you need. It's got your players. It's got the bye weeks. It's got, the ADP on it, whatever it is you think you need. And those are all really good things to have. And the ADP and stuff should be based on your league. Some drafts we're going to show you in a minute are based on, FFPC rules. So that changes things. Some things will still be the same, but you have to understand, your league, your point system. And so everything we talk about tonight is really going to be talking about it, from a PPR strategy. So if you're in a non-PPR, there are tiers up, over at Pro Football Focus that you can go see my non-PPR tiers, and you'll see what adjusts and how those things change. The other thing I would say is that you don't want to go in cold. So even if you don't do a mock draft, I'm not real big on mock drafts. I don't know how much they tell you because you're usually in there with a bunch of people. They're just messing around, for the most part. Some sites are better than others, but that's still better than nothing. What I would say is what the advice you gave people like a couple of weeks ago, just go do like a $5 best ball league. You're like 3 of them.
Exactly.
That's the beauty of those leagues. I've noticed that people have gotten better at drafting because, they can go draft 10 of those. And even though it's best ball, by the time they get to the home league draft, they've got $50 invested. And even if none of those win, they have a much better feel for what the market is, right? On all of these players.
Practice with live bullets. It's going to make you better. Practice against good players. People who have money invested actually care after the 3rd round. So if you go to like Fantasy Football Calculator, which is a fine site for what it is, you're going to do 3 rounds. Everybody checks out. Or you got some jack off taking a kicker on the turn, and you're like, this is ridiculous. I'm out of here. So it's great advice. Try something with people actually putting money into it.
The other point I would say is with your rankings, and I've actually been talking with Pro Football Focus about this, because we've got our tiers up, and I just sent in my wide receiver tier updates, before the show, where I update, all the players I have on there. If there's any blurbs, anything about guys moving around, I put it all on there, so you can go check that out. But on the cheat sheet over at PFF, it doesn't break them into tiers. So you got to make sure that because you'll see rankings and tiers, aren't necessarily the same thing. Tiers are about bands of players. And the way I do it is really about putting similar types of players. Like, are these boom bust, wide receivers, right? They go off for their 3 big plays and then they're done. Or is it a true upside receiver that may be the wide receiver 3 right now, but man, they have room to grow into a wide receiver 2 role or a wide receiver 1 role. In best ball, your boom bust. Okay. Those are nice. If you're over in a league, where, it's a redraft and you've got a season long, I like the other category better. Right. So, it's all about what type of draft that you're in. And we're mostly talking redraft tonight, but the thing I would say about your tiers, you have to test them. You have to know that you feel really good about them. I spend more time on my tiers really than anything because it all comes back to the strategy. It helps me identify where can I wait on this type of player. It helps me identify where could I reach because I know I can actually come back and grab this floor player later. When I make a reach, a lot of times it's because I know I can wrap back, right back around, so and grab, a guy that I think is actually going to be really good in the first 4 or 5 weeks, and I can wait for my reach to actually become better. So those are things that you have to be thinking. And that really comes kind of the second, thing. You're not playing checkers, you're playing chess. You're thinking multiple moves ahead. And the only way to think multiple moves ahead is to have multiple plans, is to test your tiers, to think about it. If I get to this spot and this happens, how do I feel? What if this player goes off the board right in front of me? What does that do to me? It gets you through all that, and you're not emotional when you draft. Now you're just ready. It's like you've probably watched The Last Dance with Michael Jordan Drake. He was always putting that pressure on his teammates in practice. Why? So they could play in the game. So when the game got there, it was like, dude, this is nothing versus having Michael Jordan like up my ass. That's what you have to do. You have to basically do that to yourself, and you have to put yourself in those situations so that when it comes down to it, you're not all of a sudden freaking out. You're staying calm. You just keep moving on. You keep the pressure on your opponents. So, that's huge. You have to think multiple moves ahead, but that means, you've got to practice. You've got to work through your tiers. You have to think about it. You can't just show up to the draft and sit down and expect to be awesome. Yeah, you might do okay, but I promise you're going to get to those moments and Drake, you probably had them. I know I've had them.
Sure.
Where you just all of a sudden it dries up right in front of you. You freak out. You're like, oh my God, I can't believe that guy. You just took him. And he's like, yeah, I just took him. So, and you're like, well, that was my whole plan. My whole plan was wrapped around that guy. You don't want to be that person because now your thinking's all messed up and you're going to make a mistake. So I would say that's one thing. I know that's kind of basic, so we'll keep moving. But, thinking about, strategy, you have to always be thinking about, not just multiple moves ahead, but, opportunity costs, there's all sorts of things. But one thing to think about, if you want to go for an upside player, right? And you want to do that, but you got to do it at the right spot. So if you think, hey, I like player A, I really love player A, but I need, I'm not sure, how soon, he's going to break out. So give you an example that we gave to people last year on this show, Drake. We told them to draft Miles Sanders, I believe it was the 5th or 6th round, and turn around and grab Austin Eckler the round later, because we knew Eckler was going to play the first 4 games without Melvin Gordon, and we liked him anyway. And he ended up being a league winner on his own. But what did that do? It gave Miles Sanders 4 weeks to get going. How long did it take Miles Sanders to get going? About 4 weeks. And then about
he got
8
benched
weeks
after I think it was week 2.
Right. So that's the kind of thing you're thinking through. You don't just think, oh God, I want Miles Sanders. Think through, how can I get Miles Sanders, and still be okay? Now, if Miles Sanders was my 3rd running back already, great. But in that particular example, we were showing people how to start off with 3 wide receivers to start the draft and still come back and have an awesome running back team. So that's the kind of stuff you got to think through. You're always thinking ahead like that. So when you think about, the running back cost thing, the opportunity cost thing, you just have to think through, okay, upside's great, but I don't want to just go for upside for the sake of upside, Drake. So for example, this year, everybody loves Jonathan Taylor. I like Jonathan Taylor. I think Jonathan Taylor is an awesome running back, but I also know that Marlon Mack is a good enough veteran that Jonathan Taylor, there's a chance, never takes over this year, right? That it's a split committee the whole time. Now there could be a chance that Jonathan Taylor takes over, and that's great. And I would like to invest in that, but you have to draw the line on where you want that to happen. So for example, for me, I don't get him often, Drake, because people take him in the 3rd round. Heck, this past weekend, because somebody saw him, running against air, I think there was a draft where he went in the late 2nd, which is silly. People are just double counting this stuff. Everybody knew Jonathan Taylor was big and fast. Everybody knew that Jonathan Taylor was going to split reps from day 1 with Marlon Mack in practice. And now that gets reported and everybody freaks out. Anyway, that's a whole nother thing. But the point on Jonathan Taylor, he normally goes,
show you Jonathan Taylor's ADP the last 2 days in the Football Guys Championships. Thanks to our buddy Fantasy Mojo for giving this to us. To your point, Dwayne, he went the highest the past 2 days at 2.8. Yep. So, just past the middle, almost to the end of the 2nd round, he's going off the board. His average the last 2 days is still 310, but that's a 2-round jump from where it was a month or 2 ago.
So that's a great example. Why would you ever take Jonathan Taylor at 2.8? And here's what I mean by opportunity cost. You could draft Chris Godwin, DeAndre Hopkins, sometimes Julio Jones slides there. I'm not just talking about a running back. We're talking about elite receivers that you could draft that are going to score 280 to 300 points. You're hoping Jonathan Taylor is going to score 300 points. Right? I got to have 2 running backs. No, you don't. There's a time to have to pull, the trigger on that strategy. That's just silly. That is dumb. It's not a good move. So I get it. Look, people are going to do it, whatever. If you look at Taylor, I think his overall average is still 310, but to your point, his range is getting so wide now. Here's where I'm willing to take Jonathan Taylor around the mid 4th. And it's not because, I just got to get him a half round pass value. Okay, great. But really, here's the reason why. If I look at my wide receivers that I think I'm really, 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 really firm on, that I think, they've got an opportunity for 150 targets, 130, 140 targets, and decent offenses, it's about the middle of the 4th before I run out of that tier. And that's the point when I take Jonathan Taylor, because my opportunity cost goes down. Because now my next tier of receivers, even though I may have them pretty close in points, I know my confidence level in them is not as good. Now I'm ready to take a player with upside when they slide to me. Not because, it's mid 4th.
Can I tell you some of the wide receivers going off the board currently at ADP in the middle of the 4th round? So would you rather take Jonathan Taylor there, or here's the guys from 4-3 basically to the end of the fourth round? Adam Thielen.
No way.
A.J.
Thielen,
Brown.
all the way. Yep.
Calvin Ridley.
Calvin Ridley.
Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp.
That's where you're starting to get to. That's where you're starting to get to the point right there. That's it. You just hit it. At that point, and even then, like, I still love those receivers. But at that point, I do get to a spot where with Woods and Kupp, we're not quite sure what the Rams are going to do. Are they going to be 11? Are they going to be 12? I could argue that either way. If they go 12, Robert Woods is going to be amazing, and that's really where my money's at. But if they go back to all 11, Cooper Kupp, has a huge ceiling. So it depends on the way what you feel about that situation is going to determine how confident you are in those players, which means that then you pit that against the upside of Jonathan Taylor, right? But you hit the spot. That's it right there. You just nailed it. Once you get down to, the Chark, McLaurin, Sutton, Metcalf, Kupp, all those guys, that's where Jonathan Taylor comes into play. And even then, I still feel really good about all those receivers. You're not just passing up scrubs, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But I'm just saying that's a spot, where I could see putting it into play. And I've drafted him a couple times, and guess what? That's where I've done it, in the mid-fourth. Because the guys that have to be gone, like if Thielen's there, there's no way. There's no way. I mean, the guy's a lock for 150 targets. There's just no way. I mean, he's going to score 7, 8. He could score more than that. Touchdowns. He's in a highly efficient offense that creates great looks for him. They're going to move him around. I mean, and he's a funnel. He is literally, you're getting a receiver that should be getting drafted in the second round in the fourth. That's what Adam Thielen is. And to take Jonathan Taylor over that, unless you're drafting 100 teams, and that's just what you want to do, it's just not, a good move. So I think that's a great example. The other thing I would say is leave margins. What I see some people do, and it kind of goes back to the example of being shocked earlier. Oh my God, you just took my guy. I see people put together a draft plan, and it's good because they're being thoughtful, but they're doing it based on the very best possible outcome. So here would be an example of that. Let's say you're going to use the example we just had. Let's just say you're going 0 running back because you really love some receivers. You're setting in the middle, or down towards the end, of the third round. So you're going to go receiver, but your whole plan is because you want to take Jonathan Taylor for upside as your starting running back to go with your top 2 receivers that you started with. And then you're going to come back around and take another receiver after that. And then you're going to get another running back in the 5th. Maybe that's your plan, right? Is there another player, right, that you like as much as Jonathan Taylor at that pick, if that's really your guy? Because if he's the only guy and you're building your whole strategy around him being there at 310 or 38, Brian, you just shared with everybody the range on him. It's a terrible plan. Because guess what? It's likely to bust. So, we'll talk about it in a minute. I like having 3 running backs in the first 5 rounds, and the 5th round is where I really target. I have some, targets, but there's multiple of them there. I'm not saying it's down to one guy I'm praying falls to me in the 5th round. There's several guys there, so you have these backup plans. This guy goes, okay, I still got this one. This guy goes, okay, it's getting a little closer. I mean, everything can't be perfect, but if you got 3 or 4 guys sitting there and you feel really good about them, then you're most likely to get one. That's a solid plan. Don't build the plan around, I'm just hoping that I get this guy here. And if you do that, you may need to reach, right? Mm-hmm. So have guys that you're feeling comfortable, reaching around. So leave margins in your plan. I mean, an example, that I would give of that, Drake, in 2017, when I had, 2 teams finish in the top 5 of the Football Guys Players Championship, and nobody's ever done that before. But what I was able to do is I went robust running back strategy. You hear people talk, oh, is it you go 0? No, you got to go robust. No, you got to go modified. No, you want to put together the best group of players. And guess what? That changes every year. It depends on where the values are at, where the tiers break, where the upsides sit, where are there floor wraparounds that you can grab. And every year, all that stuff changes. So you can't just pigeonhole something in, right? You got to really think through it, and you need to be ready. But think about this. So when I did go running back robust in 2017, there's a reason why. I was sitting at the top of a lot of these drafts, and I was getting Le'Veon Bell. Then I was coming back because Todd Gurley was falling that year, and nobody was on to McVay, and I loved Todd Gurley. Everybody was out. Oh, nope, just because of what had happened with Jeff Fisher, right? Todd Gurley's falling back, and guess who I'm taking in the third round every time? Kareem Hunt. Because Spencer Ware was already hurt, and I'm getting Kareem Hunt in the third. I'm not taking Jonathan Taylor in the third, who might have to split carries 50-50. The value was right. So I went running back robust. I had multiple lineups with that, and then I crammed receivers and tight ends the whole rest of the way, saving a pick for one more running back in round 10. You know who his name is?
Tell me.
Alvin Kamara.
Oh, nothing wrong with that.
Right. And so, and again, I wasn't counting on Kamara, but I knew how good he was, even though at the time there was Peterson, Ingram, but I knew what Sproles had done in that offense. I knew what Pierre Thomas had done in that offense. And I just knew that they were going to get him involved in the passing game. Now, he ended up being able to take even more because Peterson moved on. But that I knew what I wanted to do at running back. And then I also knew, Drake, guess who I was getting in the 5th round of most of those drafts that year. And I can't remember, but I think it was his first year to finish in the top 12, maybe 13 or 14. Because I was taking those running backs, I loved Devontae Adams in the 4th round. And he was typically going in the 5th, but he was my guy. He was the one I was willing to reach on because all my research was like, look, this is it. Like, this is going to happen. And so I didn't want to mess around. I'm taking 3 runners. Then I'm going to make my reach at a receiver that also had a bit of a floor on him. He was playing in a really good offense at the time. And even if he wouldn't have been, Rodgers' top target that year, which he ended up being, I still had a solid floor on him. And then guess who I was getting in the 8th round of almost every single draft? And again, I had a tier, but Marvin Jones. I want to say Marvin Jones finished like 12th or something that year. It was insane. So I had 2 receivers that I loved that I was willing to reach around on to make sure I always got them, right? And then I stacked other guys around them. So I was literally getting those 3 running backs, those 2 receivers, and then figuring out my tight ends and my quarterbacks, adding Kamara on, and a ton of drafts. I mean, that year I basically won every league that I was in. I want to say I was like 90%. And it's not always that good. Like some years I'm much more confident, about the plan, than others. Some years it's because, it's kind of close. It's going to cut the margins. Other years it's because, I may not just feel as good about players. Other years like this year, dude, there's a ton of players I feel good about. I think this is the year where there's a lot of different builds you could use. And you just need to not shoot yourself, in the foot. So don't lock on to one strategy would be my other thing. The other thing I'm going to and we'll jump into this stuff, Drake. 2 quick things. Don't be a slave to ADP and don't be a slave to mass rankings. They're really good. They're just tools.
Yeah.
Use them to build your strategy. I'm sharing with you how to use ADP. This is the stuff I'm promising you. Like, this is the stuff all these pros are doing, and they're not telling you. They're not telling you. They're laughing at you. You use it to figure out, where do I reach? Where do I hold off? How do I build the best roster? It has nothing to do with what Fantasy Pro says. The only reason you need it is because it indicates the market, right? And look, crowdsourcing is great. There is some value to it, but the true winners figure out how to use it and then gain market efficiency off of it. And again, that comes back to stuff like tiers. But tiers isn't the only thing. You have to deploy it the right way. Like I said, I reached for Devontae Adams, I reached for Marvin Jones, and I went running back robust. That was my plan. I had a very specific freaking plan. It wasn't, I'm going to sit here and wait on which guy falls to me in my tier, and if I don't like him, I'm still going to draft him. That's not your plan. So the last thing I'll say is don't catch falling knives, Drake. It's okay to have an avoid list. I hear fantasy analysts all the time say, everybody's got a value at some point. No, they don't. There's certain guys that don't have based on your roster construction, right? There may be times where at times I may say that guy never belongs on any team, but on this particular one, I'm going to take him because I think he just gives me this in this 3-week stretch. It's literally like, that's what you're thinking about. Now, you can't plan that out for 12 weeks down the road when you're making those sort of decisions. You're literally thinking about the first few weeks of the season, right? Because then the season starts and the whole landscape changes, and then you're going to use free agency. The draft's over. Then you got to go win free agency, right? Which will help people with, later. So look, that's a lot, but honestly, you can probably walk away with that and you're going to learn more. Now you can, it's like teach you how to fish kind of thing. That's what the really good drafters are doing. They're not sitting there and putting tiers together just because, yes, it's valuable because I can count. Okay, I got 5 guys in my wide receiver tier. These guys behind me, oh, only 3 of them need a receiver, I'm going to let that guy go. That is important, but it doesn't matter if you don't feel really good about all 5 guys in that tier, right? You got to really know that you feel great about them. So yes, that's part of it. But at the end of the day, it's about thinking multiple steps ahead of that is really what it's about.
I always looked at ADP and I said to myself long ago, ADP doesn't tell me where to draft players. It's telling me where you're going to draft players.
Yep.
So then I can look
exactly
at it and go,
right.
Yeah. So I can go, okay, well, I can look at, I really want to draft Joe Mixon at the end of the first round, because it says he's going to be there, but things change. Another great point I wanted to hit on you with the being flexible. I see it all the time in home leagues. And again, that's my specialty, is just being that average fan that's watching this show. I see so many of my friends walk into drafts and they know who they're going to take in the first round. They go, I'm coming out of this first round with, let's say again, Joe Mixon. And then in the second round, I'm going to take Devontae Adams. And then all of a sudden, Devontae Adams goes, Joe Mixon goes before him. They're lost. Or all of a sudden, it's like, oh my God, Michael Thomas fell to me at the 10th overall pick. Like, I'm going to pass him by? Like, no, don't do that, So you can't just go in locked and loaded like, I'm going to take running back, because if you listen to every podcast in America right now, they're telling you load up on running back. When you want to take something else, take another running back. So where we're going to start, Dwain, is the running back for 2020. Let's hear your thoughts on the running back position for 2020.
Yeah, from an overarching standpoint, I do want to try to land 3 in my first 5 rounds. I don't believe that you have to start off runner. And I know people laugh that I say runner, but I've always called them runners, and I like it because my team name in my home leagues used to be runner because I like poker. But so that just kind of stuck with me all these years. But there's times where you should go running back. Mm-hmm. But I think it's kind of rare. I think there's plenty of times to go running back. I don't know how many times you get to go running back, because here's why. I don't want to draft Todd Gurley. I don't want to draft Le'Veon Bell. I don't want to draft Leonard Fournette. I don't want to draft David Johnson. I don't want to draft any of those guys, not in the 3rd round. I don't want to draft Melvin Gordon in the 3rd round. I don't want to draft Melvin Gordon at the beginning of the 4th round. There's a couple of those guys, it's never going to be a problem, Drake, because where I have them on my board, which takes in account upside, injury risk, and also opportunity cost, freaking huge, right? That's so huge. I'm just not going to, I'm not taking them. And so I've built my strategy around that. I know that I'm going to be taking 2 receivers in that range that I like way better than all of those players, that I think can score just as many points as them, that I think has more upside than all of them. So I don't ever need to draft them. I don't want to. Even if I take a receiver in the first round, Michael Thomas, I've got a better plan than coming back to those guys. Now, here's an example though, Drake. Let's say I drafted Michael Thomas in the first because he slid to me at pick 10. Because like you said, got to be flexible. I may have been planning to go running back, but I go Michael Thomas. Coming back around in the 2nd round, let's say I grab Miles Sanders, or Kenyon Drake's the guy that's sliding there now. I'm going to take Kenyon Drake. And thankfully, Chase Edmonds' hype, is going nuts. So Kenyon Drake, keep falling my way. We know pretty much what Kenyon Drake's workload's going to be. We've seen what we've studied, what's happened. Could it be a little bit more? Yeah. But if you go read the articles that are coming out, I mean, it literally, when you read down, it's like, we have no clue really what Chase Edmonds' role is going to be, but whatever it is, it's going to, he'll be ready. It's not like, the coach said, we think he's a starting running back in the league. He didn't say, hey, we're going to give him half the carries. He said, we're going to keep our guys fresh because we want to run a lot of plays. So Chase Edmonds is going to have some value, especially if Drake goes down. But anyway, that's pushing Drake around the corner. So let's say you start with Mike Thomas. You come back with Kenyon Drake. Now you're in the 3rd round. Do you want to take Adam Thielen or do you want to take Todd Gurley?
Thielen.
Right? Allen Robinson could be there. You want to take Allen Robinson? You want to take Todd Gurley?
Yeah, I mean, Todd Gurley's not could he?
Yeah,
so anything can happen. He's not going to end the season as a top 5 running back. It's not going to happen.
And he could. That's in his range of outcomes. Right. But there's a lot of risk with him, and I'm drafting receivers there that I think can finish in the top 10. So it's not like I'm drafting receivers that I think are going to finish 36 and pass them for Todd Gurley. They're that would be different. So you're coming back around. Let's say you took the receiver first. You come back, and let's say there you go ahead and go, Thielen or Robinson, whoever it is. So you've now got Thomas, you've got Drake. You take Robinson. Guess what? That next pick, I'm going Thielen again, or Robinson, whichever one's there. Or Odell Beckham, whichever guy, AJ Brown, whichever one of those guys is there. I'm still going, with them there, and it's because again, even though I still need another running back, and we'll talk about it in a second, there's still other guys that I think are going to fall, and there are stopgap players that I think you can put on your roster to help you through the beginning of the year, and I'm going to cover them. And then there's upside players that you can still grab. And I think between those two things, you're better off using that strategy and getting the best receivers, and then coming back to running back.
Dwain, what do you think when you hear drafters in a draft room, they're big sigh, they're not excited to put the name on the board, and they're like, I got to draft a running back here. So, okay, here you go. David Johnson in round 3.
Yeah, don't do it. If you feel that way, don't do it. You want to have fun doing this, so we'll try to give the plan of how you can be ready to be flexible and still have fun. You just brought up a really interesting example though, because it's like, typically, down on that end, towards that end, I am taking a running back. I'm taking Derrick Henry. I'm taking Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I'm taking Miles Sanders. I'm taking Kenyon Drake down towards the end. But in the event, which I haven't had happen to me, Michael Thomas falls there, I'm taking him because I don't care. There comes a breaking point, right? And to me, it's after, it's right around Derrick Henry, because right now my top tier is McCaffrey, Barkley, Kamara, Zeke, Henry, and Dalvin Cook are right there together. And the reason Henry has moved up, if you guys haven't, been, paying attention, is because, and I talked about this in my tier article at PFF, that if Darrington Evans is showing he's not ready, which he's basically, he's kind of sitting over in the corner, he's got his diaper on right now and is really wet. Like, he's pissed himself pretty good. He's not doing good in pass protection. He's fumbling the ball. Derrick Henry is going to probably get the most receptions he's ever had. The only problem with Derrick Henry has always been game script. So now if you tack on 20 to 25 receptions and what that means against cornerbacks and stuff like that, you take the bottom out of Derrick Henry. So anyway, once it gets to Henry, that's the spot where I'm like, okay, I might still go ahead and take Henry, but if he's gone, I'm taking Michael Thomas for sure over, Miles Sanders. I'm taking him, for sure over Kenyon Drake and over Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who I love all those players. I love them. I mean, I've been higher than consensus on most of those guys. I think, probably longer than a lot of people, but I know where my spot is. And Michael Thomas, when he gets to me there, I've got to make an exception, to my rule. I can't be too strict. So I just thought you brought up, a really good example, but overall, like for running back, again, position does matter. I do want to own, 3 in the first 5 rounds. So you kind of just heard, look, if you're picking where you get to take McCaffrey, Barkley, Kamara, Elliott, Cook, Henry, I mean, you don't need us to tell you, take them. You're going to take them anyway. That's not what, you don't need us for that. Right. I mean, the Henry thing is, yeah, you do need to move him up your board. He's at this point, he's a value, and I'll show you a draft where I took him, the other day, Drake, and you'll see who I took him over was the guy that we just talked about, and that's what I'm saying. That's where my line is. It's at Henry, but I could coin flip it either way. So I'm taking all those guys. I mean, those are my first pick. Then after that, it's the Michael Thomas thing. If he happens to slide, I'm taking him. Okay. You could put Devontae Adams in there too. I don't blame people, because there are people that hit me up like, Dwayne, man, I'm just not comfortable with Kenyon Drake because he hasn't had enough carries. He's never shown it. And guess what? My tier right there is called open path to utilization, but unknowns, right? Or unproven. And so I can't argue with that person. They're right. Kenyon Drake hasn't shown us he can play a whole year. Miles Sanders hasn't shown us, that he can truly be a stud. I really like him. I like his utilization opportunity. So I'm drafting him and I'm okay with that. But if for some reason you're not and Devontae Adams is there, that's the other receiver you could take. After that, I think you got to be on the runners, for the first round. But those 2 guys, I would definitely make, exceptions on, Brian. Now, coming back in the second round, despite loving these players, I'm just not taking them very often. Nick Chubb, Joe Mixon, Josh Jacobs. I like all of them. I think they're all great players. I think they're all better running backs than Miles Sanders, Kenyon Drake, and Clyde Edwards-Helaire. They're all better running backs than those guys, but they're not in a better situation. And for running back, we know talent's important, but, there's that breaking point. The volume is still the most important thing. Those guys are all very questionable to get passing down work. Joe Mixon plays on a team that still might just win 3 games. Guess how often you get to score rushing touchdowns when you're on a shithole team? Mm-hmm. Not a lot. It doesn't happen. And great, you can tell me they're going to be better, but go look at Vegas. Don't be stubborn. Don't just be a fan and be like, well, man, they're going to win 8 games this year. No, they're not. No, they're not. They're probably not in their division. And if you believe that, that's great. But don't believe that during your fantasy draft because it's going to screw you up. Mm-hmm. So there's too many questions there. So at that point, there's a pivot, for me. And that's where I am pivoting back over to, if I can get Julio Jones, if I can get Tyreek Hill, we'll have to see, they're saying mild hamstring today, but if I can get Tyreek Hill, still trying to do it. And I'm even willing to pull the trigger on a Kittle or a Kelsey right there in that range, Drake. Once you get past, like 11, so if you're in a 12-man draft, you get past like pick 3 coming back this way, where a lot of times some of those other running backs go. That's where I'm taking, those receivers over Chubb, Mixon, Jacobs. And then what happens is typically those receivers go, those running backs go, and I get back to a spot where I'm actually okay going back to running back, and it's down towards the other end, and that's Austin Eckler. I become very okay with it. And then I'm going to name a player that should be a key. This is a key. This player is a key to your fantasy season.
I know who it is already.
It's getting more and more popular. We've been talking about it for a while, but it is James Conner. Mm-hmm. Does James Conner carry injury risk? You bet your ass he carries injury risk, but he's going in the 3rd round. And guess what? If he didn't have injury risk, he'd be going in the 1st because he's in a great scheme for what he does. They play power. They run more power. They run more lead toss type concepts, pulling guards than pretty much anybody in the league. And that's what he's great at. And that's why Mike Tomlin always sticks with one back. He tells you it's not just because he's old school and he likes to have one running back. He says he believes that in that style, in that scheme, you're basically, it has to be hand in glove, offensive line and running back. And he believes that's how you maximize the running game, is that way. And then everybody else is basically a throw in. They're there to give him a breather. They're there to do a little bit of something extra, but he's the dude. So in the weeks he plays, he's going to give you running back 1 upside. He's going to give you running back 1 production. It ain't going to just be upside. You can lock it in. James Conner's going to give you RB1 weeks more often than not. And guess what? If he doesn't, he's going to give you an RB2 week. His offense is going to be way better. He was on pace for like 240 fantasy points last year with a duck playing quarterback.
He was a top 8, I believe, fantasy running back through the first 7 weeks. And then, things went downhill for the team and for Conner, but he was right there. He, you look back at his pace when he was an all-pro running back, and the guy's catching the football, he's running it, goal line work. It's everything you're looking for in a running back, and you're getting him. Let's see. Let me pull up the Players Championship here. James Conner. He's creeping up in the experts drafts. 3.2 is his average.
Yeah.
Early 3rd round.
You're going to see a draft here in a minute that we're going to share with you guys. We're going to share 2 that I did this weekend. So once we run through these, and bear with us, we're going to go long on this show because last year everybody loved it and was basically saying, hey, can you come back and do more? So we're just going to fit more in tonight. And we're going to come back, and just so you guys know, we are going to come back and we'll do an updated one, here in a week. And we may come back and do, well, what if I just really want to do 0? How would I do it? We'll walk through some of those things. Tonight is more like basically you got 1 draft and how are you going to win it? Next week we can talk about, look, if I'm going to do 10 drafts, and I may want to make sure I mix things up, how would I do that? We'll come back and do that. But so Conner, I'm willing to take at the end of the 2nd. And here's why. Again, this is where you have to know when you're willing to reach, but you need to reach for the right reasons. Okay. Conner, we know, can do it. We know he's got the right coach to do it. We know his team is going to be better. Do I think the Steelers are going to all of a sudden win 11 games and throw, has been, just going to return back to 5,000 yard passing? No, I didn't say any of that, but I think they're going to be a better team. I think they're going to win 8 to 9 games. Their defense is amazing. It's one of the top 5. Everything's working in James Conner's favor. It literally checks every box except for injury. And so could he get hurt again? Yeah. But guess what? I'm going to show you what you do at the end of your draft for that. Okay. So that's the other cool thing about Connor is guess what? McFarland and Snell has been moved down here lately, but they've hinted that Snell is really the true cuff to Connor. And basically he goes undrafted. So it's a situation where even though you have a back that can get hurt, his handcuff doesn't cost you jack. It's another reason that it's a great situation. You can get McFarland in like round 15, 16. You can get Benny Snell in round 20. So again, thinking ahead, multiple steps, right? So I've already thought about, well, what if James Conner gets hurt? Where does his backup go? That should be your first question. You don't want to take the backup in the 8th round. That sucks. That's because what? Opportunity cost is too high. So he's really perfect. He's a perfect player to start off. Runner, receiver, or tight end, your favorite. Unless, you like a guy like Eckler slides a little bit. Great, go ahead. I'll show you a draft in a minute where I took Eckler. And I still think there's value in grabbing 2 of those runners. But coming back, after you take him in, you cut him off at the 2nd. And again, why I was saying that is the reason I take him there is because guess what happens after him? It's over.
No man's land.
It's Melvin Gordon, Todd Gurley, Le'Veon Bell, Leonard Fournette, David Johnson. Pass. I'm out. I have to immediately go to receiver. And guess what? Coming back the next round in the 4th, there's not going to be many running backs you're going to like there either. At the end of the 4th, you could make a reach, but there's some guys we're going to share. I'd rather them be my 3rd. It's okay. They could be your 2nd. But again, thinking through your draft position is key. So you take James Conner at the end of the 2nd. Now coming back, so you've gone, if you started early, you've taken 2 runners. If you really love a receiver, they slide to you. We'll show one here in a minute. And you want to take the receiver, great. Guess what? If you're close enough down to the end, a lot of times Connor comes back around. But again, if you really want him and you think all the other receivers are really truly equal in your tier, that's where it's not really a reach. You're just being smart. Just take him at 211. If you're sitting there and you're like, man, I love DJ Moore and Allen Robinson and whoever, Chris Godwin, and whoever else you want to name. We'll talk about receivers in a minute. If you really like all them, then it is truly just looking and going, okay, you're too early to really know what the guy behind you is going to do because he's only had 1 pick. And so you just take James Conner and then you take who they leave you coming back.
Let me ask you something, Dwayne. For all our drafters out there, this is something I like to do. If I draft, that stud running back in the 1st round on my paper where I'm filling out, hey, this is my roster, I like to jot down the name of the handcuff just so on the bench roster spots, down the line, hey, you drafted Kenyon Drake, make Chase Edmonds maybe a priority. Everyone now is talking about, it's not cool to take the handcuff of your guy. I want the handcuff of some guy I don't have. I could make the argument, though, Dwayne, that's great because I'd love to have Alexander Madison if Dalvin Cook goes down. But if I don't own him, what if I own Zeke Elliott and I don't have Tony Pollard? Now I'm screwed either way because, someone's got to get hurt.
It depends on roster construction, Drake. Actually, if you remember, it was either Pros Joe's or the Kings Classic this last weekend. Actually
Kings
talked
Classic
to you.
draft.
I talked to you about that. And the way the roster was constructed, I advised you to go for the upside of Madison versus the handcuff of Edmonds. Mm-hmm. And the reason why was because of who you had already drafted at running back. Again, this strategy that we're talking about tonight, you can feel pretty good coming away with 3. And in that case, you know what? I may think upside and think, give me Madison. Because guess what? Edmonds usually goes a round later. I'm going to chance it. Because I still feel good about getting Madison, right? I still feel good about getting Pollard. Because people, where they're right, is if that happens, you've won your league. Because there's really not that many situations, where there truly is that clear cuff on a team where we love their running game. There's really not that many of them. Now, having said that, if I've only got 2 running backs and I'm getting down to that point, where let's say for whatever reason, I haven't taken another one, but I've stacked up my receivers and all my other stuff and I feel great for it. And let's say I've drafted Drake or I've drafted Zeke or I've drafted Dalvin Cook. I take the handcuff to me first, because my number one priority in that situation is I have to have 2 starting running backs. And the other scenario, I already had 3, which always leaves me with 2, theoretically, at least until another one gets hurt, which I can adapt, unless they all get hurt in 1 week. So I play the upside. But if I've only got 2 and, I went receiver, tight end, and my quarterback, blah, 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 and now I'm sitting there, I may reach around on Chase Edmonds if I've got Kenyon Drake. I'll do that in that scenario. So does that help?
It's something that people out there talk about. They ask us all the time. Before we start jumping into another topic, something that you and I get asked all the time in our DMs is, hey, Drake, hey, Dwain. And again, hit us up on Twitter at Drake Fantasy, at Dwain McFarland, spell it DWAIN McFarland. I can choose my draft spot. What's the best spot? Where should I pick? Please help. And I know you and I wanted to address it here. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, historically, and again, it changes every year. Historically, I if I had to just say in general, it's usually the middle, because I can play the board really well that way, and I can anticipate. I'm never cut off. But there are certain seasons where the way the tier cuts fall, it can be tougher, even to be in the middle. But this year, I will say, with the news with Derrick Henry, I'm actually okay sitting around 5 or 6. And here's why. When I take, if what happens with Darrington Evans, if that sticks, which at this point, it feels pretty strong, it's tough for some, and again, there's still time. Evans could make up, blah, 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 but I just don't think he's going to take over all of Deion Lewis's work. So I think there's going to be extra work for Henry no matter what. Evan echoed, actually led, us talking about that topic with him 2 weeks ago. So, I know Evan's definitely in the same headspace, but if I can get Derrick Henry at 6, then coming back, I really get the pick of, do I get one of the running backs sliding to me that I still think is okay, or I'm going to get one of the sliding receivers like Julio Jones, Tyreek Hill. Maybe you get super lucky, right? And then Devontae Adams slides. You're going to have Hopkins in that range, right? I like going in that middle. So I'm going to get Henry. Then I get to come back, and I'm either getting Eckler, Julio Jones, DeAndre Hopkins, and Tyreek Hill. And guess what? You're probably going to get one of those. There's not going to be many scenarios when you don't get one of those. And if you don't, your backup plan is you can take Kittle or you can take Kelsey, because they are the true differentiators at their position, and you're good. You're ready, to rock. So, but for the most part, you're usually able to come back and get one of the other guys, that I named. And then in the third round, in home leagues especially, you're going to get James Conner there. He's not going to be gone. He's going to be recency bias. I don't draft James Conner. That dude gets hurt. He's going to be there in that round in your home league, almost certainly, right? And guess what? If he's not, it's easier to make it up, right, in your home league. If you think it's going to be tight, then great. Draft, Eckler, and have 2 running backs to start and leave yourself flexible in the third round. You know your league better than we do. But still, my point is, what I'm getting there, I think I get more value than being down at the 1 or 2. And here's why. Coming back in the 4th, there's a line where the receivers drop. And they're still really good. Receiver is deep. But there's some insane value down here, when I say down here in 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 range, coming back in the 4th, you get your shot at, so I've had Beckham fall to me there. I've had Adam Thielen make it to me there multiple times. I think the draft we're about to show you, Calvin Ridley made it back to me there. Always one of them. AJ Brown makes it back to me there. But then once you get a little pass, it turns into a reach. I like Terry McLaurin, but I don't love him, in the 4th round, because that offense is a turd. I like Cooper Kupp, but I got some questions, Honestly, when it gets to me down there, my guy I'm taking is, if I want to go receiver, I go Robert Woods. I feel like he's the one that's going to be, the most stable, out of those guys. And he still gives me, I think he still has some upside if, they play 12. But that 6th pick, I like, Drake, because coming back in that 4th round, there's a drop off. And guess what? It happens again in the 6th. the same thing happens to you. Even though receivers deep, the ones you really want, if you're sitting in the middle, you get one of them every time. If you're down there on the end, and again, this depends on how many people are in your league. My son's roommate DM'd me from college. My son Camden, you guys probably, I think we've talked about this already, but he went to Tech last Friday. And so he's up there, and his roommate and I hit it off right away, Drake. His roommate's a big fantasy football player.
All right. Does he subscribe to the YouTube channel? Because if not, just block him.
Yes, he does. And he hit me up in the DMs, but he's in an 8-man league. So that changes the answer, right? If I'm in an 8-man league, leave me down here where I get one of those top 3 running backs, right? If I'm in a 12-man league, because of the way I feel about Derrick Henry and Dalvin Cook, put me at the 6, because I'm going to make it up and I'm going to kick that dude's ass down there in the 4th round and in the 6th round. He's not going to like it. Like, he's not going to get what he wants or she wants. So that's the way I prefer to go. And again, things could adapt. Things could evolve. All of a sudden, Henry or Cook gets hurt. That changes the conversation a little bit. So just to finish running back, Drake. So we talked about, basically my plan is I'm going to probably take a running back in the 1st round. If I'm drafting down on, say the first 4 picks, James Conner is my plan, coming back. If I'm drafting more towards the middle, that is where I'm more likely, if I can, go ahead and grab Eckler, because Connors might not make it back to me. But if you feel strongly about Julio Jones or somebody like that, it's really hard for me to pass them when they make it there. I'm just going to pull the trigger on Julio. But you can still go Eckler. And then if Connor happens to fall back to you, you still don't have to feel bad about taking him. Then you've already got your 3 running backs and you're done, right? And you're not done, but now you can pound receiver for a little bit. Mm-hmm. But beyond that, I really don't like the running backs in the 4th round, Drake. I gave you the guys that I'm not drafting. I'm not drafting Todd Gurley, Le'Veon Bell, Melvin Gordon. Not in that round. If you wanted to make a push, I've heard people on Leonard Fournette. I will say I do believe Fournette's going to be motivated in a contract year, and he's still a young guy. So I like that. But he's just kind of a bonehead, right? He does weird things. He's an X factor. And the team, I don't know how good they're going to be. They're projected to not win very many games by people that are way smarter than me as far as projecting lines. And that's at Pro Football Focus. That's also, all the books in Vegas. So really, there ain't going to be a ton of touchdown opportunity, most likely for Fournette. And I do believe he's going to give away, touches to Chris Thompson in the passing down. And most people are like, oh, you just make it up in touchdowns. He's going to score 10. Go look at teams that win 3 or 4 games and see how many rushing touchdowns, their running backs usually average, their top guy. It ain't 10. It's like 6, 5. And he's not a guy, in my opinion, that's so special that he's going to break away enough big plays to make up for it on his own. He's going to need the volume. He's going to need carries inside the 5. I don't know how often the offense is going to be down there. I do think that offense is going to be improved. So yeah, could he get to that 6 to 7 range and pay off for you? Yeah. So he would be the one that I would say, look, I'm not just going to tell people never. Go ahead. At least he does have youth, on his side. But for the most part, coming back in the 4th, I'm hitting all those receivers. So where am I getting my next running back if I want to have 3? And it's in the 5th round. And in the 5th round, yes, in the 5th round, I want either DeAndre Swift or Cam Akers. And if, one of them are not there, people are going to hate this. But the backup plan is David Montgomery. And here's why. He's still young. He's still going to get just as much volume as David Johnson. He's going to get as much volume as all those guys we just talked about. He has a defense that could step up and allow them to run the ball more. That defense, was really good the year before. And then last year, they kind of had some unlucky breaks. I expect the defense to be better. I think Nick Foles is going to win, the starting job. So where the Jaguars are going to suck on defense and fall behind early, there's much less chance of that with David Montgomery. And Montgomery, he knows what his problem with it was. You go look at the him talking about it. He knows he was too east-west. But guess what? There was another guy that did that as his rookie year and averaged like 3.6 yards per carry. His name was Le'Veon Bell. And I'm not saying David Montgomery's Le'Veon Bell, but I remember, and I made this mistake. I thought Le'Veon Bell sucked, man, because I thought he was fat. I thought he just ran from side to side. He wasn't fast. And so I didn't draft him the next year when he broke out. And I had to go back and look at my process and be like, what did I miss with Le'Veon Bell? And so David Montgomery is like literally making bells go off in my head. So remember what I said. If you have a plan of where you want to get your third running back in the fifth and you know you want to have 3 in the top 5, your plan can't be there's only one you like. I just gave you 3. I prefer Akers, Swift, and those 2 guys first, and I mix them up because I want to own several of them, but I like them both. Kerryon Johnson's still wearing a brace, Drake. Kerryon Johnson is still being, eased back into practice. He should be over his knee injury by now. DeAndre Swift is an all-down player. He can do it all. He can catch passes. He can run the ball. He's a decent pass blocker. Kerryon Johnson is fading quickly, and I like Kerryon Johnson. I loved him coming out, but the longer he's still in a brace and they're having to manage his workload, the more DeAndre Swift should be moving up boards. Here's the other thing I'm going to say. Do not draft Kareem Hunt especially over Swift and Akers. Do not do it. That's silly. These guys are sitting in wide open backfields, right? Where all you got to do is beat out guys that either A, have been hurt and haven't got to prove it, or beat out guys that couldn't do anything. Like Malcolm Brown and Darrell Henderson. Look, I liked Darrell Henderson last year, but let's face it, he couldn't even get on the field. That's always a bad sign. He was so terrible, he couldn't even get snaps. So I'm still willing to take Darrell Henderson. And that's the other cool thing. People aren't overly crazy about Henderson. So you can get both Akers and Henderson. It's possible. You don't have to spend too much to do it. Every once in a while, somebody will reach for Henderson. But Swift, I mean, he's going to immediately give you passing down value. I know people talk a lot about Kerryon in the passing game, but I don't think it's something where Kerryon just takes that work. So I like those 2 guys. And again, as my third, they're giving me the upside I want from a young running back, and they landed in the perfect spot where they have a chance to easily beat out their incumbents. Unlike Jonathan Taylor, who I actually like his talent more and I like his offensive line more, but he landed in a situation where they ran 3 backs all of last year. Who is the most volatile running back in the whole NFL last season based on game script? Marlon Mack. Marlon Mack was the worst as far as game scripts go. 20 points, 5 points, 20 points, 5 points. Now imagine you got to split that 20 points some way. And if the 5-pointer happens, now you got to split that some way. That's in the range of outcomes for Jonathan Taylor. And again, I love him. And if he makes it, if those receivers we like it gets to that point where they're gone, that's when I'm willing to go ahead and pull the trigger on Taylor. And guess what? I might turn around and pull the trigger on one of the other running backs again. And I may have 4 running backs in the first 4 rounds. But it wasn't because I forced it. It's because I did it with a plan, in mind. And so I'll just finish out the running backs real quick, Drake. So here are some guys that if you miss, or if you want to go upside, let's say you do draft Jonathan Taylor, you're like, screw you, Dwain. I love Jonathan Taylor. Okay, well, look, I've given you all the advice I can, and I get it. There's a way Jonathan Taylor wins you your league. I just think that people are overestimating it. Let's just say you're going to take Jonathan Taylor. Here's the deal. What's the ADP on Tariq Cohen and James White, Drake?
Let's look. All right.
What's the latest? Just make sure something. I can't imagine these guys have moved.
Jeepers. Let's see. They're hard to even put. Tariq Cohen is going in the middle of the 8th round. James White is a round earlier. He's 7th. Tariq Cohen's in the 8th.
So you can grab, if you take Jonathan Taylor as your second running back, and let's say you go back to receiver in the 5th or whatever, those are 2 guys that you can think about that, you know what, I'm going to grab one of those guys just so until Taylor takes over and gets the whole backfield, let's say it starts off terrible for some reason, you've got a backup plan. If you're going to draft Taylor, go ahead and start in week 1 because I think he gets Jacksonville. So, you might as well go ahead and roll your new toy out. Mm-hmm. But after that, when he runs into the rougher matchups or they play against better offenses and they could get behind, you've got options. Here's the other person that, can be a guy that everybody's just letting go by, but I see him slide into the 7th round sometimes of these drafts straight, and he goes in the 6th round. And it's not that I'm crazy about drafting him, but if you want to plan for, I took an upside guy and now I need a guy to last me for so long, it's Mark Ingram. You get him in the 6th or 7th round, and it's not that I love him. I don't make him part of my plan to win my league, but as far as if I'm going all upside, but if I want a player that I can feel good about the first 3 or 4 weeks, you can feel great about Mark Ingram the first 3 or 4 weeks. I promise you, and you're going to be fine, and you can wait for your upside runner to come and play, so those guys are all there. And then late rounds, I'm going to give everybody, these are the guys that I pound. And Keyshawn Vaughn is so cheap now.
Love him.
I mean,
haven't given
up.
Here's
the thing. I know I've said a lot about Ronald Jones, and my point was more that Bruce Arians didn't trust him last year, and he couldn't ever overtake Peyton Barber. That really bothers me. It's great that Ronald Jones's trainer loves him, and he's putting all these things out. But I don't really know what anybody expects his trainer to say, that he's training Ronald Jones and he wants him to pay him next year, and Ronald Jones sucks and he's not a hard worker.
Right.
What do we expect his trainer to say? But here's what I will say. The positive thing is his quotes himself seem to say that he does realize that, like, this is it. This is his chance. And so here, I'm not against taking Ronald Jones in the 6th round. If you've got 2 running backs, and let's say you didn't take one in the 5th, and you come back and you can get Jones in the 6th, I don't disagree with his upside. I'm not going to sit here and say, because he has a range of outcomes that could make him a top 12 running back, I'm not going to disagree. I just don't think it's as likely. And I've also been following all the news and how Tom Brady likes Ogunbowale because he thinks he's a great pass blocker and he's a great route runner, and Jones has worked on those things, but he's still got to prove it. And we know Jones wasn't trusted inside the 5 last year. So for me, I like Keyshawn Vaughn falls to like the 12th and 13th rounds now. So I love it. Zach Moss, who's going to be moving up after the news today. I mean, Matt Waldman talked about it multiple weeks ago when I was on a pod with him. He's like, Zach Moss may just destroy Singletary this year. Latavius Murray and Boston Scott. I'm pounding those guys in round 10 and on. We already talked about Pollard, Edmonds, Madison. Here's the thing I love about Boston Scott and Latavius Murray, Drake. In a pinch, they can fill in a flex spot, but they are also similar, right, to the Pollard, Edmonds, Madison tier, in that they really are the handcuffs right now for the other guys. I think Ty Montgomery is a guy you can take really late. You could see Latavius Murray really just take on more of Mark Ingram's role that he used to have, because last year really Kamara took over more, right? Where it was Kamara and Ingram, and everybody's like, okay, Murray's going to be the new Ingram. He wasn't. He got like a fraction of what Ingram got. But at a minimum, Murray's either going to grow in. If Kamara gets hurt, Murray either takes over the whole backfield or he turns into Mark Ingram, from 3 years ago. Those are all winning propositions. So Latavius Murray and then Boston Scott's the same way. Miles Sanders is already dinged. He's probably going to creep up a little bit now, but he's a good pass catcher. He plays behind a good offensive line, and he proved that he can do it. So Boston Scott's a guy that I'm all over because he can potentially give me PPR value in a pinch, but he's also a great handcuff in a great situation if Sanders goes down. Then here are the guys that I'm going for, Drake, in like rounds 13, 14, 15. Josh Kelly, Damian Harris, Bryce Love. I'm drafting all those guys every time I can. And guess what? Because I own James Conner so much, I draft McFarland, even though I don't think he's the true backup, but I can't say for sure. They're saying it's Snell, but who knows? So I'll go ahead and draft McFarland, and then I'll take Snell at the very end if you're taking James Conner. And if you just want to draft one, just take McFarland because he's the one everybody else drafts, right? Say you're in a 13-man, a 13-round league. Just make McFarland your last pick. Nobody's even going to know who Benny Snell is. Mm-hmm. So if you think James Conner's about to get hurt, you just need to beat him to the waiver wire. What most fantasy sites are going to say as soon as James Conner gets hurt, everybody go pick up Anthony McFarland. That right. I guarantee it. 90% of sites are going to say that. And it could be right by then, by the way. But you'll already have McFarland on your roster. The guy nobody's going to talk about is Benny Snell. Sigmund Bloom from Football Guys probably will. He's really smart. He'll have him down there. He'll have him down there as the 2 to 5%er, right? Hey, just go sneak him in. 1%er, sneak him in. And so you'll be able to sneak Snell in. All you got to do is just know, I'll just overbid everybody by, and I don't have to bet all my money. I'll just overbid by 15%, which still isn't going to be a lot. And I've already got McFarland covered, right? So that's my running back plan, Drake. You got to have 3. You don't have to. I try to have 3 in the first 5 when it works out right. And then I like to come back in rounds 10 through 15 and get a lot of those other guys I talked about. And then, super late, and all those guys are starting to creep up now. I used to be able to get some of these same guys in like round 17 and 18. They're all kind of in that, 12 to 16, 17 range. The guys that are in the 10, 11 range are really your true handcuffs that we talked about. They're a little more sexy, but Murray and Boston Scott, they're 10th, 11th round picks. Pollard, Edmonds, Madison, they're anywhere they can range from like 9th to 11th. Darrington Evans is still a guy I'm willing to take. He was kind of moving up, but now that his draft stock falls, I'll still throw him on there, at the end of a draft. I'll still throw AJ Dillon in there too, so those are the guys.
Boy, let's let Dwain catch his breath, get a drink. I just gave you an hour on fantasy football running back draft strategy, because there's no more important position in fantasy football. We like to say, running backs don't matter, but it's nonsense. They do, of course. You've got to have running backs if you're going to win your league. And if you want to win your league, go back, listen to some of our old shows on demand on YouTube. We just spoke with John Hansen, Evan Silva, Graham Barfield, Mike Clay. We have a bunch of drafts that we did, Kings Classic, Pros versus Joes. You can check those out. The Kings Classic draft is off the charts in terms of people watching that on YouTube. So, of course, subscribe there. If you're checking us out on YouTube, give us a nice review, tell a friend, and get everybody involved in the hustle. Maybe we'll even send you one of these snazzy shirts that Dwain and I are rocking tonight.
Hey, Drake, we had a question in the chat room. It's a good one. We kind of hit on it, but FF Swirly asked, what if someone beats you to Connor? Who's your next guy up? So if you're down towards, again, picks 1 through 3 or 4, you're typically going to get Connor. In your home league, even in the middle, you're probably still going to get Connor. You may still get him at the end. There's going to be some of you guys write us and you're going to say, man, I had pick 12 and I got James Conner. It's going to happen. I promise.
Sure.
It's going to be there. But let's say, for example, you're picking, 4th or 5th where it's kind of hairy, right? And the value is still good enough that something slid you in the second where you can't just force Connor there. Let's say Julio Jones made it and you're like, Julio Jones, boom, take him. Coming back, if Connor's gone, I'm off of running back. So what I do is I take the receivers I want. Or I'll take one of the top tight ends if they're there. So typically what I'm going to do then is I may go ahead and just grab Thielen right there and say I'm not going to worry about waiting on him until the 4th unless there's another guy I really like. Coming back in the 4th, I'm going to grab AJ Brown. Coming back in the 5th, I'm going to go back to my plan. I'm going to get one of those running backs that we just talked about, between hopefully it's Swift or Akers. And typically it can be in that range. And then, David Montgomery's kind of your backup. I'm going to get one of those guys. And then coming back in the 6th round, depending on what receivers are falling, that's where I may go ahead and just take a guy that, look, I don't love him, but I know he can start for me early in the year, and that could be Mark Ingram. The other play you could make, and it'll work in your home league for sure. In these drafts, I've seen a few people pull it off, but he's kind of creeping up, is Antonio Gibson in the 7th. So basically
nobody in your home league is going to know who he is.
Right. So you're going to be able to get him later, than that. And then you can still get Bryce Love, even later than that. And again, it depends on what receivers are falling, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to stick to my plan in the 5th. I'm still going to get one of those running backs that we talked about, but then coming back in the 6th, again, that's where you could, in that situation, that's probably where if Ronald Jones slid to me, I would be like, I'll take Ronald Jones. Again, I don't want to catch falling knives, but I don't consider Ronald Jones to be a falling, knife in the 6th, because I know his range of outcomes does include a top 12, even though I have major concerns around him. Right. And I know Keyshawn Vaughn goes in like the 12th or 13th round. So that's a situation where I'm not taking Ronald Jones a ton, but in that situation, I would do it. I would say, great, I just grabbed Swift, and then I'm going to come back and take Ronald Jones. And in the 1st round, I have Derrick Henry. Great. And then I'm back on my strategy. I can hit all those same running backs I talked about later. And in between now and then, I can hit the receivers, which I know you're ready to talk about, Drake.
Let's do it. Let's move over to wide receiver now. Basically, wide receiver has become a position that in a lot of these mock drafts and industry things, you almost kind of just cross off, it seems, the top like 4 or 5 wide receivers, because people just go like, I don't care about these guys at all. Let's look at the meat and potato guys that I can get in rounds 3 and 4, because everyone's going running back early. So I'd love to hear some of your favorite targets at the wide receiver position. And then, you said you want 3 running backs through 5 rounds. How many wide receivers do you want to pencil in through 5, 6, 7 rounds?
Yeah. So this year, I really want to own, and I'm still willing to take the other receivers. So when Julio falls to me in the 2nd, when Tyreek Hill falls to me in the 2nd, I take them. If I'm down towards the 1 and the 2, 3 hole, when DeAndre Hopkins falls down there, I take him. I know people are worried about him, But I mean, I think one thing people are forgetting, and I've talked about this a lot. Look, he's still a stud. Everybody knows that. I am worried about Kyler Murray. There's some concerns with Kyler Murray. I know that, Arizona spreads the ball around, but Arizona last year was 31st in time of possession, absolute worst in the league. They had the second best play rate in a neutral script, right? Their pace is very, very high. They just got unlucky in some cases because guess what? It's really hard to only hold the ball 45% of plays. It's really, really hard. It's really actually very hard to repeat. So if you look at the Cowboys, Drake, who were the tied basically with the Cardinals in pace and neutral scripts, they finished 47.5%, I believe, in time of possession. That extra 2.5%, basically they ran almost 2 full games worth of plays versus the Cardinals.
They also did they lead the NFL in yards, the Cowboys, I believe?
So yes. And so if the Cardinals just slightly get better in time of possession, which doesn't even have to mean their defense. It could just literally be getting a little better on offense. It could be defense gets a little better. It could be defense gets way better. There's all these combinations that mean you get better in time of possession, right? And so it's hard to repeat being that sucky. So what that means is, when I think about that, guess how many plays? That's like an extra 120 plays. 60 of those are going to be passing attempts. Even if I think DeAndre Hopkins only gets 25% of the targets instead of his usual 30 versus the pace that the Texans run at, which is lower. It's like middle of the league. Hopkins could still end up with like just slightly less than his normal targets. And so people are just not thinking about that. I mean, and he's still just too good of a player, right? I mean, it's just hard. I'm not letting DeAndre Hopkins slide into the third round if I'm down there. So in that second round, if Julio falls to me, Tyreek Hill, DeAndre Hopkins, I'm willing to pull the trigger. Obviously, Devontae Adams, and there's another question in the chat room that, okay, at what point, do you take – we already talked about Michael Thomas and where the cutoff is. Adams really belongs in the same tier as Thomas. It's a funnel offense. He's it. And he has a quarterback that can get him the ball. And hopefully Aaron Rodgers will cooperate more this year with the scheme. He will learn that it will actually make him a better quarterback, and it'll make his receivers – it'll help his receivers and tight ends that aren't that good. The scheme will help them do more for him. But it's mostly going to go to Adams. I mean, if there's two guys that we're saying there's almost a lock that they're going to get 150 to 175 targets this year, and that could be low, it's Adams and Thomas. I mean, so – coming back around the corner, I'm taking Adams, and I think I may have already said this earlier. I'm taking him over Jacobs. I'm taking him over Nick Chubb. I'm taking him over Joe Mixon. Those guys have too many questions for me. Mm-hmm. And it's not, again, I love those running backs as running backs. I really do, And look, wild things happen, Drake. What's going to happen? Jalen Richard's going to blow out his ACL in week 1, and Lynn Bowden is going to, whatever. Get suspended from the league. I hate to say something bad about a guy like that. And all of a sudden, Josh Jacobs is going to catch 70 balls, right? And everybody's going to be like, man, I told you Josh Jacobs is going to catch 70 balls. Well, yeah, it's in his range of outcomes. Something like that could happen. So you're still betting on talent, and that's okay. But here's my problem. Devontae Adams is going to score 300 points anyway. I'm hoping Josh Jacobs can score 300 points. So, and yes, it's running back is scarcity, but there comes a point where the opportunity cost is just too big for me, and Devontae Adams and Julio Jones are two of those guys. I'm not taking Chubb and those guys over them. You could maybe make an argument on Tyreek Hill because, Hill's range of outcomes is a little bit bigger just because he doesn't get the targets they get, but he's such a great playmaker. I don't want to pass Tyreek Hill. He plays with Patrick Mahomes and the best offense in the league, so I'm typically not passing him either. So once I get past those, right, and I get past Hopkins, then all those running backs I said, if one of them are falling to me, all of a sudden, say I'm picking at pick 4 and Nick Chubb falls to me, I'm in. Josh Jacobs falls to me there, I'm in. I'll take them both over Chris Godwin. And I love Godwin. I think we were the original Godwin truthers, Drake. I think the Libertarian sign, we were like, Godwin's going to blow up. I remember because I was like at a hunting lease with my dad with no reception, and I put that out on Twitter, and you were the only back then. I think you were the one person following me, Drake. I think you retweeted it to your one follower.
I still have the one guy.
But so that's kind of the breaking point on receivers. But here's the way typically, let's say if I grab 2 running backs first, I mean, these are the receivers I want one of these three, period. I want Adam Thielen, DJ Moore, or Allen Robinson. I want one of those three, right?
Mm-hmm.
Thielen, I think every one of those guys is a lock for 150 plus targets. Robinson, I'm not crazy about the quarterback, but here's the thing with Robinson. He's been playing with a bad quarterback his whole life. I mean, he overcomes it. He overcame it last year.
Who the hell else is there?
Yeah, he finished I can't remember now. He's like top 10 last year, Robinson was. So he's a guy that I want. DJ Moore, I want. Adam Thielen. And again, so now I'm in that third round. I don't want to take, the old running backs with risk when I can draft these receivers with less risk that I think have the same upside and probably a little bit of a better floor. Okay, you can put Godwin into that same range once you're down into the third round. I still love Godwin. There's just some things, that I think he's going to have to deal with that are going to be a little bit different. And I still really like him. And you're getting what I love about Godwin is you're going to get involved in a great offense, right? Targets and yards are always great, but let's face it, who typically wins your leagues every year? Who are they, Drake? They're the guy that from out of nowhere scored 18 touchdowns. And you're like, what the? Derrick Henry last year down the stretch.
DJ Chark, and you're like, who the hell was DJ Chark? Guy averaged 15.6 points a week.
So touchdown scorers are huge. So again, when I say that about Godwin, I don't want people to take it wrong. I'm willing to pass him to get if a running back falls to me in the second that I wouldn't normally take, with Devontae Adams there. I still love Godwin. I'd rather take him, at the third round is where I'm back on the train, with Godwin. So I want to get one of those guys, Thielen, DJ Moore, Allen Robinson, Chris Godwin. I want one of those in the fourth round. My backup plan in the fourth round is Odell Beckham Jr. And here's why. Played with a core injury all last year and it screwed with him playing against man coverage. He really struggled. If you're playing against man, you're playing against press, just imagine yourself like trying to do a swim move and look at all the techniques they have to get past the defensive back and what all's involved, your core muscles, everything else. He's been a monster against man coverage for most of his career. I don't believe you just fall off the cliff in 1 year. So I expect Odell Beckham Jr. to return, to his normal self. And guess what? Now he's going to play in a scheme that is going to give him looks he's never had. Other teams are going to be worried about Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt when he's on the field. That's what other teams are going to be worried about. So now you get this offense that puts defenses in a bind. Deebo Samuel went off as a rookie in this kind of offense, right? A.J. Brown went off as a rookie in this kind of offense. They're going to run 30 to 35% play action. One of the best ways, Drake, and this is a Josh Hermsmeyer thing, and I went and researched it, and he's freaking totally right. The dude's so smart. One way to go find some of these guys that are going to go forward is find guys that are going to now be getting more play action passes coming their way in the intermediate, areas of the field. Odell Beckham Jr. is set up for that. He can still beat you every way if he's healthy. He can beat you over the top. He can high point beat you. He can catch a ball underneath, and he can go 80 yards for a touchdown. So Odell Beckham Jr. in the third and sometimes on the fourth, oh, yes, I'm all over it. And if you prefer a little more upside, from your round 3 pick, say then maybe you think, man, I just don't. Allen Robinson, Dwain, I don't like Nick Foles. Take Odell Beckham Jr. Take him. Now you're still going to deal with Mayfield, but the thing is, you're going to have a scheme that's basically like guardrails for a quarterback, right? I mean, and I like Ryan Tannehill, but look what Ryan Tannehill did last year. Look how good Jimmy Garoppolo, did. They ran the ball a lot, but if you get to be that number one receiver and you get stuff funneled to you, and again, Landry's even great for where he goes. But so I want those guys, Drake. I want to make sure I have one or two of those, preferably two. Juju Smith-Schuster fits in that as well.
Mm-hmm.
You have A.J. Brown fits in that. Mike Evans fits in that. Mike Evans slides to the fourth round. So I guess just recap, Drake. Here's the whole tier. If I can get two of these guys, I really want to. And here it is. It's Thielen, Moore, Robinson, Godwin, Golladay. Throw Golladay in there too. I just don't take Golladay over some of these other guys, and it's just because it's truly spread out, right?
Mm-hmm.
Marvin Jones basically gets the same looks he does. So I think Golladay could be a little bit of a candidate for regression. The tier I have him in at Pro Football Focus is, great talent, in a loaded offense, where he's competing. He's competing with Marvin Jones, and even Amendola gets his looks. TJ Hawkinson's going to be better. So I like Golladay. I prefer to try to get him in the fourth, and it's kind of hard to get him there, though. But I don't blame anybody. You want to take Golladay in the third? I'm fine. He's in the tier. So Thielen, Moore, Robinson, Godwin, Galladay, Juju Smith-Schuster, A.J. Brown, Mike Evans, Odell Beckham Jr., Calvin Ridley. And you can throw Amari Cooper in there. And then you can throw Robert Woods. I'd like to get 2 of those guys. Robert Woods is basically my backup plan for you guys and gals that are going to draft down on the other end. You had Zeke and, you came back, and I actually did this weekend. Woods just falls down there. And I mean, he's going to be worth it. He's not as sexy as some of these other guys because he doesn't have the touchdown upside of some of them. But if the Rams do play more 12, he has sneaky upside. And I don't think his floor is far off from where you're drafting him. Whereas Cooper Kupp has got a probably higher ceiling if the Rams go back to all 11 all of a sudden, because we've seen what Kupp can do in that scenario. But Kupp's floor is also way lower. His range of outcomes is like this. Robert Woods is like bring the floor up here and just bring the ceiling down slightly. So I like taking Woods, in the 4th round if I'm down on the other end and I need a receiver. He's very commonly there. And I have him in this tier. So
I think this is a good spot. Let's bring up that draft you did and kind of showcase what you did at the wide receiver position with your roster build.
Okay.
All right. So here's a draft that Dwain did. So tell everybody who's watching on YouTube and listening at home, what pick were you?
Yeah, I'm pick 3. So if you see the DMC logo, that's me. I'm in your draft with you. So it's just Dwain McFarland. That's just always what I've used. But
very original.
Yeah, very original. But hey, look at the man. The M is unique. I mean, I use the slashes to make it instead of whatever. So I took Zeke in the first, easy, right? Coming back, Hopkins slid to me. Look who almost made it to me, Nick Chubb, right? I would have pulled the trigger on Nick Chubb down there. But look what happened to make that work. Just so you know, this is a tight end premium league, just so you guys know. And also you flex 2 guys. So you have 2 receivers, 2 running backs, 1 tight end, 1 quarterback, and then you have 2 flexes, and it's tight end premium. So that's why when you see these purples, a lot of people are going to go, what the hell? This guy went Kittle Ertz. That's why, because it's like that's the way this kind of league works. But so that changes things a little, but not too much for these first few rounds, because really Andrews and Ertz, and Kittle and Kelsey, they all kind of still go in these ranges, even in normal drafts, Drake. You'll see Andrews and Ertz fall a little past that sometimes. Like I'll still see Ertz sometimes fall into the 5th in these. But you'll typically see Ertz go in the 5th round, in a normal league this year. And
the last 2 days, 3-9 in the 80 Football Guys Players Championship.
Yeah, so in this particular format, but look what happened. Somebody took Mahomes in the 2nd, and that's what – and who was the other one?
That's going to happen in home leagues.
Jacobs went way up here. Oh, here's the other one, Melvin Gordon. That's what happened. It was because I was sitting here and I know who I want, and I'm looking at it. I'm like, okay, man, Chubb is left and Hopkins is left. Number 4 here is our buddy. Oh God, what's his name? Kevin Scott. He was in this draft, picking 4 here. I'm not going to say, which number here, but the guy that won the Football Guys Players Championship was in this draft too. He drafted a really good team. He won $250,000 on this thing last year. But so I went Zeke, Hopkins fell. So Chubb and Hopkins were sitting there. And then this guy goes, I'm like, man, I'll get lucky. Maybe one of them makes it. I was already prepared though, to just say, I'm going to take James Conner in the 2nd because it's not going to make it. Well, this guy goes Mahomes. This person goes Gordon. So Chubb goes, so Hopkins falls to me. So what did I do? I adapted my plan. I didn't take James Conner in the 2nd. Okay. In this kind of league, I mean, I'm willing to do it. You don't have to do it in your home league. So coming back, I get Conner. And then what we just talked about, coming back. And here's why, being down here, I talked about this earlier. Being down here, I don't like being down here quite as much as being in the middle. Look at this.
When you say being down here, this means the first 3 picks of the draft.
Sorry. Yeah, first 3. The receivers, look at all of them falling to these people. This, Calvin Ridley, Adam Thielen, Juju Smith-Schuster, Mike Evans, DJ Moore at 12, and getting back, it's Adam Thielen gets right here. And I like Robert Woods, but I would rather own Thielen, Ridley, A.J. Brown went early. This guy was on his plan. This is a person that's definitely just on their plan, right? They don't care. They're not deviating. They're just on their plan, doing their thing. And that's what that screwed up receiver a little bit too, because notice this guy's already taken 5 before he has a running back.
There's
right?
a guy here. So the people just listening on the pod, there's a guy who picked 10th, went receiver, 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 receiver to start, then took
Tight end,
Evan Ingram, and then
then
another receiver. His number one
Yeah.
running back is Matt Breida.
Yeah.
Yikes.
So you got to be ready for these things, right? This was almost perfect. If he hadn't taken, probably Cooper Kupp here, there's a chance Thielen makes it to me. But this is why I just the 1, 2, 3. As good as I feel about Henry and Dalvin Cook and Kamara, even at 4, I'm willing to give up McCaffrey because the receivers coming back in 4. I would rather own some of the other guys that we talked about, and Thielen is the main one that makes it a lot. And AJ Brown does too. He went here. I mean, I've gotten AJ Brown in the 5th in one of these. So, and notice who I let go, Drake. Don't catch falling knives. This is actually a really good one to show. Leonard Fournette and David Johnson fell. They don't fall this far, but I didn't deviate. Here's why: because I still have Robert Woods graded equal with these two guys. I don't think he carries the injury risk that those two guys do. Mm-hmm. And it was at a point where you could have said, man, everybody's got a value somewhere. I mean, and they're getting close, at that point, but I also was thinking, you know what? I want Woods here because my tier drops off. Okay. And at runner, I don't have these guys very far ahead of the other guys that I like, but my thought was one of them actually could come back, to me. And so I let it go, but I let them go by. Again, not on offenses, not on an offense that I really like for Leonard Fournette. David Johnson, I think, still going to have to share passing downs with Duke Johnson. And the data I look at, he no yards after contact, and he doesn't avoid tackles. So, and it's gone down over the last 2 years. So I'm worried that, he's hit the wall. So coming back, I did just what we talked about. I took Cam Akers, and in this one, in the 5th round. Yep. Mm-hmm. Okay. Coming back in the 6th, I got another receiver, and I took AJ Green. AJ Green hadn't pulled his hamstring at this time, and I'm still okay, with the pick. This is another one where I wanted Devontae Parker. That's why I like being in the middle. Coming back in the 6th here, if I could have turned this team into, I get, let's say I get Adam Thielen, and then I also get, Devontae Parker. I really love it. Right. And I'm still going to probably get Akers or Swift. The trade-off, though, is you don't always get Connor in this kind of draft. In a home league, though, you're probably what your draft is going to look like. You're going to get Derrick Henry. Let's say you come back and even took DeAndre Hopkins like I did. Then you're going to go James Conner. Then you're going to go Adam Thielen. Then you're going to go Cam Akers as your running back 3. And then you're going to come back and get Devontae Parker, who's probably going to see 150 targets. Right. He's a guy, he literally could see that me. I think I've got him graded at 130, but 150 is literally within his range. And so everything feels just a little bit better. The 7th round. So at receiver, Drake, this is a guy I take in almost every draft, and it's Brandon Cooks.
Yeah, you're big on him this year.
Well, I mean, why? Dude, people have been drafting Brandon Cooks in the 4th round for 4 years. Now he's in his best situation where he only has one other guy. And he's got a better quarterback. And now all of a sudden nobody likes Brandon Cooks. I mean, I know he had the 2 concussions late last year, but before that, I mean, he's only missed 2 games in the last 4 years. And guess what?
He's been knocked out of games too. That's what's hurt him. You remember the Super Bowl he got knocked out of, and he's kind of left some games. So it's he's missing weeks. He's that guy who gets a concussion and miraculously comes back the next week.
Yeah, I would actually. He has had some of those. I'll have to go back and look at it again. I actually pulled that data up too. It's not near as much as you think. He's not a guy that actually leaves a ton of games. Not until last year.
I just remember a certain Super Bowl that he left.
Well, yeah, but that's because you remember that instance and it's sticking out to you, and that's making you think it happens to him all the time. We'll double check it and come back. You could be right, but I look at that on all these players. Not just games that they get hurt. I actually grade the games that they miss partially, and I count them. Because to me, it's a pain in the ass, just like you said.
Mm-hmm. So, Brandon Cooks 7.9, his ADP.
And I love Cooks this year. So here's the other thing. In the last 4 years, no other receiver in the NFL has gotten open. And when I mean open, that means 2 steps of separation or more. No receiver's done it more than Brandon Cooks.
Boy, he's got opportunity. I mean, Will Fuller, who knows if he can stay healthy? Hopkins isn't there. These other guys, Cootie's scrub. Now, I mean, you got.
Exactly. So you build that upside in. Fuller could go down.
Sure.
I mean, Fuller, now that's where you gotta knock 4 games off. and we'll talk about Fuller. I still draft Fuller. I will draft Will Fuller in the 6th or 7th round because in the games he plays, he has wide receiver 1 upside every single week, and he has win your matchup every single week. And oh, by the way, this year it's okay. Why? Because receiver is deep, and you can wrap right back around and back Will Fuller up in the 8th and 9th rounds. There are certain years where you might have looked at that and be like, man, I can't take Will Fuller. I got to take this guy. And that may have actually been really the good strategy because there weren't a bunch of other guys you'd feel good about putting behind him. So I love Fuller, and I will take him over Cooks, but people just let Cooks slide. I own him a ton. AJ Green, I only own one time, but he was in my tier, and I feel good about my tiers. I don't force it, with him, but my plan was I wanted to have 4 wide receivers, and I feel good about it. And then in the 8th round, basically, and some of this is tight end premium in a home league, I might kick this down the road a little bit more. I took Gronkowski, and here's one reason I take Gronkowski. One, I don't think he's going to play as many snaps, but he's going to be heavily used where it counts. And I don't want to spoil quarterback, but I draft Tom Brady a lot. And so if I can make a pair, it's an easy way for me to get a pair, right? Where I can put 2 guys together with Brady and Gronkowski, and I don't have to pay the early pick. I don't have to count on it being Evans or Godwin. And I love stacking Brady with those guys too. But you can see what happened here in the 8th round. It's coming back. Also, I'm reading my board, right? After I picked Cooks, Hayden Hurst, Hunter Henry, Jared Cook, TJ Hawkinson, Mike Gesicki all went. And so I took Gronk. And again, that's because in this league, it's 1.5 premium. And so I might have let it go otherwise.
Right.
Then I come back, Drake, and here's what I love to do at receiver. In the 9th round, I love Jalen Reagor because he's young. He's going to have opportunity. We've talked about him. I love Henry Ruggs. He's going to move all over the formation. I know we hear that Brian Edwards, and I love Brian Edwards too, but we'll talk about him. You can draft him later as well. But the notes and stuff that are coming out, if you guys haven't seen about Edwards, when he was on the field as a starting receiver in practice, it was a day with a bunch of scrubs. It wasn't with the normal starting offense. So you got to go look at this kind of stuff. And I think Edwards has a chance to pass Tyrell Williams on the depth chart. I think there's a real possibility. But I'm very certain that Henry Ruggs' spot for this year is safe. And and again, we're in the 9th round, right? Reagor, Ruggs, and CeeDee Lamb are my top 3, rookie receivers. And I'm not somebody that's always huge on rookie receivers. But I think if you think about each one of those guys, and Drake, you've talked about it, Rager's probably going to be number 2 to Ertz. Mm-hmm. He has a shot to do that, and you could get real lucky, and he outperforms Ertz, right?
Yeah, I mean, he's lining up everywhere, every position.
But it's in the 9th. Then they're going to ask him to play X, and that scares the piss out of me. I wish he was just going to play the slot all the time. I don't know if Reagor is ready for the top cornerback on the other team. That's going to suck.
I think that's when they kick him out to when they run 12 also, and it's just him and Deshaun on the field. If they go 11, he's out there with Ward in the slot. I mean, who knows? But it's going to help him or Deshaun.
I'm just saying, my concern with Reagor is who he's going to have to line up against.
Sure.
If he shows anything very quickly, the top corner on the other team is going to lock on him. With Ruggs, we already know they're going to kick him into the slot a bunch. And with CeeDee Lamb, you can't because you have to deal with Amari Cooper, right? Amari Cooper sees double coverage more than anybody in the NFL. He sees the top shadow corner more than anybody in the NFL. Mike Evans is close right thereafter. So if you want to know who the best receiver is on each team, that's how you go find out. You go see what the other teams do. So Evans and both Cooper see a ton of it. And so CeeDee Lamb, I'm taking every time I can in the 8th round. Man, I love the guy's upside, even as a rookie. And here's why. Jason Witten's gone. They're not going to be able to run a ton of 12 personnel. So you're going to have Jarwin. They're not crazy. They do have, Schultz, who's a blocker. So they'll still use some 12. But it's not like it's going to be a package they're trying to work in because, we want to get 2 tight ends on the field to win this game. It's going to be more, they'll use it some to run the football. They'll run some play action. 21 is also going to be a problem. So 21 is when you have 2 running backs and typically one of them is a fullback, right? Because Alawale, their fullback, he is out due to COVID-19. He opted out. So now think about it. What is my best, way to get my best players on the field is pretty much to have Gallup, Cooper, and CeeDee Lamb on the field. And so Guess what? Mike McCarthy has done that before, where he just, he's mixed things up more than people think, but he's very willing to get all three of those guys on the field all the time. And guess what? The Cowboys have a good enough offensive line to make that work. See how you have to think about everything? It all comes together. Like, some people are like, oh my God, I love this receiver. And I'm like, man, they can't stay in 11. They can't win 10. Their quarterback will die immediately. The Cowboys actually have the offensive line to make it work. Rager, to your point, the Eagles have an offensive line to make it work if they want to, right? The Raiders have an offensive line to make it work. All three of those teams have offensive lines. That means they can run 11, 10 personnel, move guys all over. They're way more flexible. They don't have to have two tight ends in to help block all the time, right? So those are things that you got to think about. So those three guys, Drake, man, in rounds 8 and 9, and you know me with Lamb, we've done a couple of those drafts together. The other guys that I'm counting in that range, Drake, when Hardman makes it to me a 9, I take him in the 9th or 10th just because he doesn't make it to me a lot. I'm not sure that he's really going to take over for Sammy Watkins or that he's even going to be the third receiver. All I know is that, the guy caught 26 balls last year and it was like 500 yards, and he plays with Patrick Mahomes. So he's in that tier because if for some reason he finds his way onto the field, just say for like 70% of the snaps, and I think last year he was like below 60, just give that guy an extra 15%. And if all of a sudden he's gotten better and he can kind of, he can be the third option in Mahomes' progression more often than, he can be one of the first two reads sometimes, but he's the third is kind of the worst kind of a thing versus before wasn't getting on the field enough. And could even be a later read unless they're set. But the thing is, they set up special plays for him. So what I don't like about him, I'm not taking him typically over some of these other guys just because I don't think he's going to see the snaps. And I don't think there's a chance for the offense to be centered around him like the other guys could.
Sammy Watkins still hasn't practiced in several days with a groin injury. So he's already off to a Sammy Watkins-like season.
Yeah. So at receiver, I named the other tier earlier. Here's the other tier. So coming back in that 6th round, and I got AJ Green there. Here's the guys I prefer there. Marquise Brown, Will Fuller, right? I prefer those two guys. And then my next guy on the list is, AJ Green and Stephon Diggs are right there. Sometimes T.Y. Hilton slides there, and I'll take him.
I like him too this year.
Yeah, but usually Hilton goes. But you can see he did. Like this one he did. Like he almost slid back in the 6th. So I like Hilton, but normally the guys that I can count on being there that I really like, are Marquise Brown, Brandon Cooks, Will Fuller, and even, Stephon Diggs. At this point in the draft, I'm okay with it. If Stephon Diggs is my 3rd or 4th receiver, I like it. I don't like Josh Allen, but I'm getting a really talented receiver where guess what? The market's actually smart and priced it in correctly. That Stephon Diggs isn't a 4th round pick or a 3rd round pick. Because think Drake, like 10 years ago when there wasn't as much news and information and people weren't as good at this, people just thought, Stephon Diggs, he's great, man. Draft him in the 3rd round. Now it's actually like people look at it and go, oh, he's with Josh Allen. He's a 6th round pick. He's an awesome receiver. He's a top 2 round
the
receiver.
Mafia is going to be out after us after that.
That's okay. So anyway, and look, see, we got Marcus Mosher's in here and he can confirm. I think he's talking about Ruggs. Marcus, you can tell us, if you're confirming on Ruggs or not, but more about, the Raiders than any of us, or you could be talking about Lamb. I know you love the Cowboys too. So, so those are the guys, Drake, that I'm typically coming back. I would rather have one of those guys, than AJ Green, but it worked out the way it did. Here's a couple of guys that I'm really not taking in the 7th and 8th round. And I'm not totally against them, but I'm not taking Michael Gallup. And the reason why is, if for some reason teams stop shadowing, Amari for any reason, it's going to really hurt Gallup. Amari is open on 40% of his looks, despite facing the top corner and often bracket coverage. Like I said, more than any other player in the league. Gallup always, up until now, right, he's had the best matchup on the field because even though he's not great, and I like him, he's a good player, but Gallup's not an elite player, like Amari. And it shows up in all of his data. If you look at the percentage of times that he's open, despite facing the number 2 or 3 corner on the field, is like 25%. It's like really low versus like everybody. And if you compare him to his peer group on other teams that get to always face the 2nd or 3rd cornerback, it gets even worse. So I just have a few concerns with Gallup, and it's not so much about him. My concern is now when I get CeeDee Lamb in a matchup against the third corner, that's even better than Gallup against the second, because Lamb is a better player than Michael Gallup.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
Gallup's getting talked up.
Gallup Gallup's a pro, and Lamb's got to learn, but Lamb's getting the third matchup, and he's never going to get the bracket. So give me Lamb and his athleticism against the third corner over Gallup and being a decent player against the second corner. And, of course, this is all great for Dak Prescott.
Yes, and we're going to get to quarterbacks in a second. We got to get cruising here. I know we're an hour and 40 minutes into this thing, but hope you guys are enjoying it. It's the Fantasy Football Hustle Draft Plan Show. Brian Drake, Dwain McFarland, rocking and rolling here. Before we put a bow on wide receivers, a couple of darts that you want to throw here at the end of drafts on guys?
Yep, so here's guys that I'm drafting in pretty much every draft in rounds 11 through 15. We basically covered up through round 10 so far. Let's start with we'll go in order. So rounds 11 and 12, Paris Campbell, Curtis Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, even Anthony Miller, I will sneak in there. And Brashad Perryman. People are starting to catch on to Perryman, because Denzel Mims is, dinged up, and people are starting to think, wow, man, Perryman may be the second guy, in the offense. The thing I'll say about Perryman, you're getting him late. What I like is last year he showed over the last 4 weeks to be able to take on additional coverage, because over the course of those weeks, Mike Evans missed 3.5 games, and Godwin, I think, missed 2.5. I would have to go back and look for sure. But it was essentially just Perryman, and they were asking him to do different things other than just go deep. He still had a really deep ADOT, but a lot of that is just Jameis Winston. He wants to push the ball down the field with everybody. But Perryman showed enough that, he could easily be the number 2 receiver on this team. He could potentially be the number 1 from a fantasy perspective. I think Crowder probably still leads the team in targets, but looking at who else they've got to go to, and we'll talk about Herndon in a minute, who I'm liking more and more the more time that Mims misses. But I really like Perryman. So those are keys. Now here's the deal. Paris Campbell, Curtis Samuel are just elite athletes that are going to play on teams that are invested in trying to make things work. They're going to move Samuel all over the formation. Do you know that Curtis Samuel played more snaps at receiver than any other receiver in the league last year? Not Paris Campbell, Curtis Samuel. That's crazy, right?
Really?
As a second-year guy, and people think of him as, oh, man, he just, he's not out there much. Look, he showed that he can be out there. He had a shitty quarterback that couldn't hit some of the things that he does well. When you still watch him, the guy can get open. He can run after the catch. He's a better receiver with the ball in the air. If you don't believe me, go look up at Jay Moyer FB and look up Curtis Samuel, and he'll show you the catches that Samuel makes in coverage, things that I didn't even think he did, that I'm like, oh, wow, like he can do that. So his game has grown a lot. This is a guy that wasn't very polished, and now he's in his 3rd year, and he's on a team that has an innovative coordinator. Is it 4th year? 4th year. Now you have, Joe Brady as your coordinator, and they're going to move him everywhere. He's going to play running back. I bet he gets 15 to 20 carries. And the guy could easily, Drake, he could be the second receiver on the team. Like he could be the second guy. Like and he's talented. So I want to own Campbell. I want to own Curtis Samuel or Paris Campbell. Paris Campbell, the Colts love him. He's a mismatch out of the slot. He could also be the replacement for T.Y. Hilton if he gets hurt. And he's another guy that run after the catch. Where does Phillip Rivers love to throw the ball and timing routes? Underneath to guys that can, get things done. That's where Paris Campbell's going to be operating. I like Michael Pittman, but he's going to be working outside. He's going to see, stronger coverage. They're going to move Hilton all around. So to me, that leaves Paris Campbell, and I still think Pittman could be good too, but Campbell's just going to get the matchup I want. With him, it's really a matter of how often are they going to be in 12 versus 11, right? And can he get on the field in 11? But still, I'm ready to invest in the 11th and 12th rounds. These are guys that you could look up, by week 3 and be like, holy shit. Like I have a wide receiver 2.
If you went to Ohio State and played wide receiver, draft them late. That's the moral of the story.
Yeah. So then the other guys, now let's go a little later. So Ayuk fits in there too, and he's starting to creep up there. Really, Ayuk should be going in the 10th round. You could argue even kind of getting close to the 9th round where we talked about Lamb Ruggs, and Rager because he's going to play in a great scheme that bases everything off play action, that's going to get him good looks. He's got a run after the catch skill set. So he fits right in there with those guys. We already named Perryman. So now let's go a little bit later than that. These are guys that I'm not as crazy about, but I'm like, okay, you're going to let me keep drafting these guys. I will. So once you get to like around 14, 15, and you can see in the draft board that's up there, I'm doing these things, Drake. I took Jalen Reagor in the 9th. I took Paris Campbell in the 14th. I took Brian Edwards in the 16th, which is the guy I'm about to name. N'Keal Harry's been having a rough camp, but there's still a chance, right? That he could be the number 2 receiver on the Patriots. Like it's literally wide open. So I'm still willing late in the 14th to 15th round. Give me the upside play. Now I'm going to circle back and name some names that people aren't going to expect. And this is the one draft you guys are looking at that this past weekend I did 3 of these where somebody snaked him from me, and it was a damn auto pick. If you look down at team 8, he auto picked Randall Cobb. But Randall Cobb is a guy, man, like get him in the 15th round. Are you kidding me? Like, so if you think in running backs, we talked about guys you can circle back to so you can go upside early. Because I'm drafting CD Lamb in the 8th. I'm drafting Jalen Reagor in the 9th. I also know that I'm drafting upside, and I feel really good about those opportunities, but they could go south. Cobb's my safety blanket. Golden Tate, I don't remember where he went in this draft. Golden Tate is going to be on the field for every snap for the Giants. They're going to run more 12. They're going to run different formations. They're going to run 21. Guess who's going to leave the field? Sterling Shepard. So there's going to be a lot of times where it's going to be Golden Tate. Darius Slayton's going to be stretching the field over the top. And you're going to have Evan Ingram, if he's healthy, working the mismatches against the linebackers and safeties. If Ingram's not in the game for whatever reason, there's going to be a lot of plays, man, where Golden Tate's the first read. So Tate is literally, and you get him for free. Like, people don't want him. They literally just he went in the 15th round of this draft. I passed him because I had to get McFarland because that was the other thing. I had James Conner, so I got McFarland. But I wanted to take Golden Tate or Cobb there. I hated having to pass him. The other guy that I'm taking here, Drake, this will be the last one. I know we got to go to the next stuff. There's more, but you guys can go read PFF. I can't give everything away. The last guy that's here, and I actually think he deserves – he's getting really close to being in my Paris Campbell and Curtis Samuel tier, but, he is a rookie. But it's Laviska Shenault. Like, the more you read about it, they're moving him all over. They're making him learn all the positions. Now, some people – look. We've heard this in the past. Sometimes what does that mean? It means trinket player and it sucks. But you're in round 15. The way I look at it is they're going to get him on the field, and what if he kicks ass in week 1? Guess what? Week 2, he's going to be on the field more. And week 3, he's going to be on the field more than that. And by week 4, you could have the number 2 weapon in the Jacksonville Jaguars offense. And guess what? If he is just a trinket, you took him in the 15th round, you cut him in week 2 to go pick up whatever running back, is the hot waiver wire commodity. So you're not spending a ton. But I have him in the tier in a sub tier with Campbell and Curtis Samuel. And again, the knock is I don't like, those offenses, quite as much as the other two. And he is a rookie.
So we're gonna pick up the pace really here. That was the meat and potatoes, running back, wide receiver. For tight end, give me a couple of guys that you're willing to target if you want to take them early. Just give me the overall plan. Hey, I want to take these guys.
I'll make it
early.
fast. It's boom bust. It's boom bust. If you get Kittle or Kelsey at the right value in, like, say, the second round, I've done it multiple times, you do it. Differentiates your team, you're done. After that, here are the guys that if they slide far enough, I will take them. I'm not targeting them and building my draft plans around them, but there are times when people just get super stubborn about tight end. And I'm like, okay, if Zach Ertz, Mark Andrews, I'm going to name Mark Andrews first. Mark Andrews only ran around on 61% of the snaps last year. They get rid of Hayden Hurst. He was still an elite tight end. Imagine a world, folks, where Mark Andrews is just on the field for running a route on 80%, right, of the times that Lamar Jackson drops back. He has legitimate upside versus what he did last year, even if he has touchdown regression, which is likely because Lamar Jackson isn't going to throw 36 touchdown passes or whatever it is again. It's just not likely. So if Andrews falls, and when I say falls, if he falls into that 4th round, I am willing to take him. If Ertz slides into the late 4th, because of what we talked about, the receivers that go in the early 4th, sometimes I'm willing to take him. The next guy is Waller. For whatever reason, like I think Waller will still be the leading target on the Raiders. I think people get really concerned because it's like, oh, they had all these weapons, but they're still young, right? I expect Ruggs to be really good. but I don't know that he can just take over. I think Waller's a mismatch anywhere. No linebacker can cover Waller. Most safeties can't cover Waller. And he's a run after the catch machine. Like if people want to know like how Derek Carr's, almost set a career record in yards per attempt last year, this guy's a huge part of it. Like what he did after the catch is pretty amazing. And I don't necessarily see it. A lot of times you talk about regression. It could be sustainable for him just because like by the time he catches it, the linebacker, he's gone. The linebacker's now out of the picture. It's a matter of, is the cornerback going to catch him basically? So Waller, when he slides like that, I'll do it. After that, basically, I'm just reading it, Drake. And a guy I will take a swing on if he falls into the 7th, 8th round is Higbee. I think it's risky, but at the same time, if it hits, it's going to be worth way more than Ingram, Gronk, Hunter Henry, or Hayden Hurst. If it misses, it misses. So if you take him, you just got to be ready for it to suck and adapt, but it's tight end. You can find another one. I'd rather take Higbee with upside, than do some of the other things. So we saw what Higbee could do. Yes, it was a short stint, but if they go more 12 personnel, he'll be the second read way more because that kicks Cooper Kupp off the field. So it's Woods and Higbee. And that's what happened last year down the stretch with that team. Those two guys were the top 2 targets over and over and over and over and over and over. When Kupp gets on the field, that makes things a little more different. That makes things more difficult. So Higbee I will reach, but otherwise, man, I'm just waiting, and I'm fine taking 2 of these other guys. I love Gesicki falling. I'm fine with Noah Fant falling. I love Irv Smith. Oh, I drafted Irv Smith here. Irv Smith, yes, right now he's still splitting snaps with Kyle Rudolph, but he overtook Kyle Rudolph in snaps, routes ran, everything down the stretch last year. And guys, just think, this is upside pick. Think about George Kittle. This is the same offense. I'm not saying this guy's Kittle, but Irv Smith's a really good athlete. We just talked about Darren Waller. He's not quite that fast, but he's a mismatch. He's a lot to handle for a linebacker or a safety, especially when they're worried about Dalvin Cook, and the wide zone running game. And, Kirk Cousins is a guy that can get him the ball. He could easily be the number 2 target on this team this year in an offense that's perfect for tight ends. So if you want an upside tight end, it's Irv Smith. I actually prefer to draft him, Drake, over Blake Jarwin. I prefer to draft him over a lot of people like Jack Doyle, Eric Ebron, Ian Thomas. I draft him over all of those guys. And yes, he could still be the Rudolph thing could happen, but I'm drafting the upside at that point. I like Jarwin, but he's going to be the 4th or 5th guy on the team. He's going to be a touchdown spike week guy. Yes, you're getting in on a great offense. Yes, your best case on Jarwin is what you're hoping, Drake, is what Eric Ebron did 3 years ago when he was only on the field for like 40% of snaps and like 50% of dropbacks, but luck hit him for 10 touchdowns. Right? And everybody was like,
crazy because we're like, this guy's just insanely efficient because he runs, 8 routes a game and catches 2 touchdowns. It's nuts.
Yeah. Now you can get Jarwin, late. Jarwin went right before me here in this particular draft. I got Irv Smith in the 12th, but I'm taking Irv Smith over Blake Jarwin. But I'm not saying don't take Blake Jarwin. I'm just expanding why I take Irv Smith over him.
Irv Smith was the 50th overall selection 2 years ago. He's a guy's a 2nd round pick out of Alabama. He was a stud.
Yes. And the thing that has people held back is the Rudolph thing. But again, he was already starting to take over the role period last year. So you got to imagine now he's 2nd year. You just have to bake that in. And you're getting him in the 12th round. Here's why I like Irv Smith. If he hits, he can be a top 6. Blake Jarwin can't be a top 6. He can't. And you're playing for upside at this point. Irv Smith is like, if you look at every tight end taken here, Irv Smith can be the 2 in his offense and a great offense for tight ends. I like Ian Thomas, but he's probably the 3rd or 4th guy on his team. I still like him. It's worth taking him. Chris Herndon, you can make an argument for Chris Herndon, right? Especially with Mims being hurt. He could be the 2nd target, on his team. Sure. Ebron, Knox, Olsen. I mean, all these guys are going like Irv Smith, like definitely has the ceiling over all those guys, So anyway, that's tight end. Any other questions on tight end?
Let's move it over to quarterback because we're cruising along here. And quarterback in an expert league is different than quarterback in a home league. So in an expert league, everyone tries to play quarterback chicken. And they're like, yeah, I'm going to wait until the 58th round, and then I'm going to take, Ryan Tannehill or whatever. In your home league with your buddies, that's not going to happen. Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes are going to go in the second round. Let's be honest, folks. That's what's going to happen. Lamar Jackson might go in the first to some guy who's 38 White Claws deep. So those guys are going to go early. Do we think you should take a quarterback that early? No. So let's get Dwain's draft plan. When do you want to take a guy? And this is a great spot where you could go to quickly go through quarterback. If I get to this round, I want this guy. If I get to this round, I want this guy.
So here are my trigger points on quarterback. And again, this is in this format. So your league, you could adjust. But what I'm going to say is just don't reach. You don't need to. Yes, you would like to get one of the quarterbacks that has legs and has weapons. And that's how I have one of my tiers broken out. But I'm just going to say real quick, people, they overestimate that. It is important, but there are quarterbacks that don't run that score just as many points per drop back as the guys that run. And that's really what you're looking for, guys that have been consistently efficient. So, for example, Drew Brees scores more points per drop back or the same amount of points per drop back as all the guys we love that have legs, like Russell Wilson, Deshaun Watson. He's higher than Kyler Murray by a bit, right? He's over Josh Allen. Matt Stafford did it last year, and he's got great weapons. And he's got Darrell Bevell as his coordinator. He's going to keep pushing the ball downfield. Nothing's going to change with Matt Stafford. He could have some touchdown regression, but he's got some badass receivers. He's got a tight end that's up and coming. And he's just glad that he's away from freaking Jim Bob Cooter, who made him freaking, throw 4-yard passes for 3 years, thinking, what the hell? Now he gets to do this. So I throw that out there, but here are my trigger points. If I get to the 7th round, and it's probably, 7th or 8th, in a home league. I know in home leagues, you'd be like, oh man, he's going to go on the 5th. It's okay. Just let it happen. Just let it go. It doesn't matter. Typically, if Dak falls to the 7th or the 8th, I take him. And it's because I have him in a tier of his own below Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes. So my tier is Jackson, Mahomes, then Prescott's in his own tier. And it's look at the weapons. It's look at, Dak's proven that he can do it. He's finished. Look at how many times he's finished, in the top 12, as a quarterback, even in years when they ran the ball. So you get a really good floor, even if things go wrong, and the ceiling is super high. We've already talked about all the receivers. We've talked about, as much as Jarwin may not be my favorite for my favorite upside tight end, I love him as a 4th option for Dak Prescott, and they're going to play against teams that still have to worry about the run game. He has a good offensive line. He has everything you want, right? So Prescott is right there. If he makes it the 8th round, I'll pull the trigger. My next guy after that, and here's the thing. These other guys I'll do the same, but normally they don't make it here, so I don't get it. But Watson typically goes before Dak in quite a few of the drafts that I do. But if he's there, I would do the same thing with Watson. And Russell Wilson, I would probably do the same thing. It's just for whatever reason, a lot of the stuff, Wilson's probably more of a 9th or a 10th. But Josh Allen is my next one, Drake. So when Josh Allen makes it to the 10th or 11th, and I don't like Josh Allen as a quarterback, but I like him as a fantasy quarterback. Why? Because he scores rushing touchdowns. He does have an improved receiving core. So while Josh Allen isn't great for Stephon Diggs is good for Josh Allen, right? And who knows? I mean, I don't want to just kill the guy. He could improve. His accuracy could really get better. So I'm good with Allen in like that 10th, 11th round range. Then after that, again, kind of in his own tier alone is Tom Brady. And it's, again, look at the weapons. And Tom Brady's just, when I look at it, he's the type of guy, Drake, he doesn't just want to beat you. He wants to destroy you. He wants to show Bill Belichick. And you know me, I don't do narratives, like ever. How often do you hear me do a narrative on this show?
Context matters, not narratives, right?
Yeah, I never do them.
But the guy like Starbucks Brady, screwed up my latte. I'm going to kill him now. I'm buying Starbucks. I'm putting him out of business.
Exactly. You think of the weapons he has, and you think back to when he's had those kind of weapons. And people talk about him not being able to throw deep. He was actually one of the better deep passers in the entire league last year. If you go look at passes over 20 yards, he doesn't win by having a strong arm anymore. He wins by having anticipation. So Brady's the next one. And man, in the 12th or 13th, he's my trigger. Then after that, if I miss for whatever reason, every once in a while somebody will reach. My backup plans are Drew Brees and Matt Stafford. My absolute backup plan to all of that, and I don't care what's coming out of camp, it's Cam Newton.
Love me some Cam this year. You know that.
And it's fine. If you draft this weekend and you draft Cam Newton in round 15 to be your starting quarterback, and all of a sudden we hear Jared Stidham's going to be the starter, there's going to be so many guys on the wire unless you're in a super flex. It's fine. You'll figure it out. If you want to take a backup because you have Cam, go ahead. I mean, that's fine too. But Cam, here's the reason I like him. He's essentially an arbitrage play on Josh Allen, and you get him 4 rounds later, right? I mean, it's the same guy, 3,200 yards passing, going to get 8 or 9 rushing touchdowns, get maybe 500 yards rushing. They're the same. Now, what I like about Allen is the upside of his receiving core, right? Versus Cam doesn't have a lot to work with in the receiving core, there. So that's my plan, at quarterback. And literally those are like my triggers.
I'm big on Matt Ryan. I like
Ryan can
Stafford
fit
a lot.
in there too.
And Big Ben, to me, is a guy who is overlooked all the time. Great platoon player. If you're going to kind of just throw a couple quarterbacks out there, he opens the season with the Giants. Name the Giants corners. That secondary is garbage. So I got a feeling he's going to start off the season pretty hot. Good guy. You can.
The reason I don't name Matt Ryan is because he usually goes, because here's the deal. I can get Brady or Stafford, who I like better than Matt Ryan, in the 13th or 14th. Mm-hmm. So Ryan will go anywhere from the 9th to the 10th. I think in this last draft I did, he was in the 11th. And so I don't get him. As far as Roethlisberger and those guys go, it's like you said, some of those guys are going to be on your waiver wire.
Sure.
I don't want to start week 1 with one of those guys, but if I have to, I will. I'm not targeting Ben by any means. I've got some concerns. I think he's going to be better than what they had last year. I think he's going to be good. But I just have, some concerns with it, but I have all my tiers up, like I said, at Pro Football Focus. And this is the kind of stuff I think through when I create, those tiers too. And those tiers are what helps me put together, what my plan should be. So when you hear somebody say, oh, I'm a zero running back, or, oh, I'm a robust running back, or, oh, I'm this or that, man, forget all that shit. It's about really working through all of this and figuring out what's the best way to put together the best roster that gives me all the things I want. Upside, I can come back and cover my ass. I can get a handcuff for a certain guy I want that I don't have to pay a shit ton for. I know where my teardrops are. And this keeps you flexible. You can dominate any draft, like with this kind of approach. The thing here's I'm just going to throw one more PSA out. What is robust running back and a lot of these things based off of? A lot of that research, right, goes, well, last year when people did this in this format. So you hear people say, yeah, last year, man, when you draft a quarterback in the 14th round, you won 12% of your games. Well, no shit, because you took Lamar Jackson. So that's not really a good data point. So throw it out the window. Like, you got to think about that stuff. Always when you hear that kind of stuff, I always think, okay, what running backs were going in those rounds that made that worth it? Or where, because here's the thing. This year, I don't want to start with 4 running backs because I already told you I don't want to draft Todd Gurley. I don't want to draft David Johnson. I don't want to draft those guys in the 4th round. I'm willing to draft
last year's best team.
Yeah, so you don't force things because it may have worked last year. And I'm not saying that that's what all analysts are doing. Some people are going way further than that, and they're looking at it from a different way of why they want you to do one thing or another. The other thing you have to remember when you hear a lot of these strategies, some of these people are trying to win these major tournaments like what I play in a lot. And so they're also baking in this contrarian model that if I need to do something way different from everyone else to be able to have a chance to win $500,000. That's the thought process. And there's value to that thought process, but you shouldn't use that for your home league. And I would also say it's still not the best thought process to win a league like this. And here's why. Because when I force that, and I've already headed down that path, it really sucks when all of a sudden everything starts breaking my way. And I'm like sitting here going, shit, look at all this stuff falling to me. And I already forced this other strategy. If you're going to draft multiple teams, you want to have all this plan together. You're going to understand how everything works, and you're going to build absolute monsters at times where you're just like, I can't believe these people are leaving them. And if you start down a path where you just got to do something, and I asked Kevin Scott about it in this one, he was in the 4 hole, and I was like, man, I kind of felt like you were trying to force 0 wide receiver, and he said that he wasn't. But if you look at his draft, it was Thomas, and he sat for a while. I know he loves Nick Chubb. He sat there. And waited. And so I knew he was considering it. I felt like he wanted to go Hopkins, but he did take Chubb. But look at this. He took Michael Thomas, and not that that's bad. He took Michael Thomas at the 4th, right, in this draft. He could have taken Alvin Kamara. It's not that I think Michael Thomas is not better than Alvin Kamara, but again, position scarcity. So think about it this way. He took Thomas, and then let's say he was trying to force 0 wide receiver. And let's say so Nick Chubb makes it back to him. Great. So now he's got Michael Thomas and Nick Chubb. Guess how often in the FFPC, this format, people have Kamara and Chubb together? It ain't that freaking often. Guess how often people have Michael Thomas and Nick Chubb together? A ton. So that's the other thing that you're thinking through when you're drafting like this. I get it. If you draft 100 teams, you're going to go just try some crazy stuff. And I see people do it, and it's fine. I get it. Maybe that's 10% of your portfolio. But overall, like even if you're drafting 20 teams, I don't force stuff like that because this kind of thing happens where I'm like, man, I could have had Kamara with Chubb, plus Allen Robinson and Thielen making it. Thielen doesn't normally make it that far back. I would have paired those 4 guys together. I would say 3 of those are fairly rare. To be able to get, if you would have had Kamara, Chubb, and Thielen making it back, I'd have to go look, but my guess is you're probably one of 15 teams out of the thousands that have drafted or so. I could be wrong because ADP moves around. But as far as the drafts that are going on now, you can't do that. And so again, it's not to say that Thomas was the wrong pick there. It's to say if he was forcing wide receiver, it ends up being wrong because he just missed on a stack that nobody else gets.
Hey, folks, that was 2 hours of just beat you over the head fantasy goodness. So Dwain, thank you. That was just, man, I feel like you're going to have to like take like a nap or drink a 5th of Jack or something, man.
I gotta finish an article.
And I applaud the folks in the chat room and all those guys still watching, especially on YouTube. A lot of our viewers are watching there tonight. So that's the Draft Plan Show, folks. We're going to come back the next few weeks here, or a few days, I should say. We don't have that much time. And we're going to talk about specific plans. Hey, I want to go and take a tight end early. What does it look like? What happens if you go with a couple receivers to start? So we'll kind of play around with some things. Appreciate the feedback that everybody's giving us here awesome in the comments and on Twitter.
Room. I'm sorry if we didn't get to all of it, but we can go back and look at these, Drake. We may want to like screenshot them. I mean, some of the stuff may be what we get to in the next one. Like a really good one to look at is, well, what if I do take a tight end in the second? And again, you have to be playing chess. So now that you do that, you always want to have a plan. Like the value fell there, but we'll walk you through. If you do that, what does that mean for round 4? Does it mean something? Does it mean something for round 5? Does it change things? Right. So yeah, we'll walk through all that. Well,
we appreciate it, folks. It's no longer my birthday. We've done the show so long. We're now into the next day. But for Dwain McFarland of Pro Football
Happy birthday, Drake. Everybody give Drake a happy birthday.
Yes. And crack a beer. I'm about to get into number 2 here. He is Dwain McFarland. I am Brian Drake. We'll see you next time on the Fantasy Football Hustle.